Welcome to the Week in Sports Cars, presented by Marshall Pruitt, or presented by Cooper Tires, or presented by DailySportsCar.com, possibly presented by Graham Goodwin of DailySportsCar.com, and presented by an overabundance of awesome questions from our normal singular week in sports cars. So it's an overtime episode, Graham. It's a holiday overtime episode. We said we would get to all the rest. We were unable to earlier this week. So what do you think? Is this kind of a holiday holdover episode? What do we call this?
I think it's a kind of holiday special. We're decking the halls with boughs of questions. La 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 la.
Wow.
La 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 la.
I love it. All right. Well, as you can tell, we're drunk already. Every single sheet to the wind. Kidding aside, I'm Marshall Pruitt. It's about 8:40 a.m. Saturday, the 22nd, here in lovely Northern California. That would make it 4:38, 4:39, 4:40 p.m. or so in the UK with you, Mr. Goodwin. Before we get to questions, we've got lots of questions. Tell us about the Goodwin family. What are you guys doing for the holidays? Please tell me Trudy is not allowing you to work through it.
Oh, no. We
don't need Algonquin GT4 BOP stories out of you, my man.
No. My next step out the door on official business will be something like January the 7th. I'll be on my way to Buriram in Thailand for round 3 of the Asian Le Mans series. That'll be my next away trip. But no, the Goodwin family will be staying here in lovely Epsom. Yesterday, by the way, the shortest day in the UK. And we're getting into full night time as I look out.
Something where all the tall people stay home, or what is that exactly?
They do. It just means that it's got the least daylight of the year. Was yesterday.
Oliver Gavin remains in the basement all day long.
But no, we'll be here at home. Christmas Day we'll be spending with my very good friends. That's becoming something like a bit of a new tradition. Some good friends of mine, and beyond that, there'll be, I think, a lot of good food in the kitchen, and a lot of decent TV, and just a little bit of family time. There's been precious little of that over the last few weeks, and I've missed my girls.
Well, amen to that. I will be heading off to the Roareth before the 24th here in, 2 weeks from now. We will be into the second day of the event there, just as a little sidebar and fun so far. And I'm going to keep coordinating little things as they occur to me like this, but we'll be doing a reunion of the 1996 IndyCar championship winning team, that being Jimmy Vasser, who's now a co-owner in IMSA's GT Daytona category, his then rookie teammate Alex Zanardi, who is with BMW Team RLL and GTLM, and Mike Hull, who is the managing director of the Ford Chip Ganassi Racing GT effort. And the opening question's going to be, how the heck did we end up here 22, 23 years later with you guys in frickin' GT racing? What is going on?
Isn't that cool? Isn't that just the coolest?
So we're going to do that. We've got some time set aside to record both a podcast and a video of that. And then still scheduling this, trying to get the exact time locked down, but going to do I don't know how to describe this, but basically a celebration, origin story, and tales of the amazing Chevy Intrepid GTP machine with Bill Riley, whose father designed it. Bill was also involved. Tommy Kendall, one of the drivers, and his teammate Wayne Taylor. So I'm just going to try and think of some thematic bits like that we can turn into podcasts and little videos. Why? Well, you get good friends together, you make good stuff. So that's all fun. And then I am, hopefully, by the end of today, I'll be done and ready to post my oral history of the Fast Masters series that I started capturing, I think, late July, about this wacky American televised experiment, Graham, of taking seemingly then priceless Jaguar XJ220s and smashing them into one another with legends of the sport on the world's smallest oval/roval at Indianapolis Raceway Park. So hopefully I have that up as a holiday feature. And the last item to mention, and this is inspired by you, Mr. Goodwin, because you told me to do it. You told me to do it last year, and I didn't get it done. And that was the super freaking long holiday trip podcast. So if you are driving somewhere, if you're on a plane, a train, whatever it might be, submarine, some sort of long trip, going to try and come up with many, many hours in a single podcast comprised of a lot of, I guess, either favorite episodes or things that I might like or think you might have liked. And so, in theory, I don't know what it's going to be, Graham. 5 hours, 10 hours. I'm just going to chuck up a big old podcast where, hey, we're going to try and get you taken care of for that long drive or long trip wherever. So
fantastic. And then in January and into February, I know we've got some plans for some further live events. We'll be keeping you appraised of that, but there's a couple of very significant events. We're currently talking to various people about getting variously involved. So you've got some good stuff beyond just the week in sports cars, which will keep as regular as we can. Some good stuff to come into and then through 2019.
And because I just feel like being in a very brief sharing mode. Haven't announced this publicly, but very, very happy to have received an email from our friends at Cooper Tires about a week ago that said, hey, 2019, let's keep doing it. So we will be continuing with Cooper as one of our primary partners. Thank you so much to them. And I've had some other discussions with other possible partners. One that's been involved with the show. Actually, two that have been involved with the show this year that want to continue and expand for next year. And another that has not been a part of the show, but are dear old friends dating back to my teens that might be involved. So I think things are moving in a pretty cool direction. Look forward to announcing some of these things, dear friends. Might have some actual week in sports cars presented by ... to add in. And I got to tell you, we thank you so much for listening and sending in your questions because it makes us happy. And the numbers are good and great and getting better. And businesses are saying, hey, this is a viable thing. You two are wacky as hell, but the show itself is not so bad. So, all right, with all that said, we are done with preambles, my friend. We have, I don't know, what did we get to? Half of the questions?
Well, we did, but since then we've had a couple of little bits of news breaking, haven't we? We now know the shape, more or less, of what we're going to see at the Rolex 24 at Daytona, in particular at the Raw. So that's looking very healthy. Full grid by the look of things for the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship. That's great news.
Indeed. All kinds of good stuff. So what we're going to do with this episode is essentially answer all the ones that we were not able to get to just a couple of days ago. And we are going to hold for all the new news. We've even had a number of questions come in already. New questions that we're just going to hold for next week. A genuine Christmas-ish, just post-Christmas, week in sports cars episode. So with that said, Graham, knowing that we have a heck of a bunch to clean up here with our, call it, overtime episode, which category shall we start? We've done IMSA first, I think, the last week or two, so we should probably point our attention elsewhere to begin.
Well, go on then. Let's do the ACO World side of things. And indeed, the very first question. The very first, as I stand on my phone, that's what the heck, stand on my phone there you go. The very first question comes in from Cookie Monster FL. He's one of our WC Redditors, and they've been a firm part of the support network for this podcast, and thank you guys, and a Merry Christmas to all of you. Cookie Monster says, happy holidays, gentlemen. With what is looking like a grandfather year for privateers in year one of car, and for those that haven't been keeping up, car is the phrase that Mr. Marshall Pruitt managed to apply to the hypercar LMP1 replacements yet to be officially named for the 2020-2021 season. So that's car. Do you expect an EOT that remains hopefully even, or will we see specific disadvantage to these older cars, a la 1991 Le Mans cars with Group C cars, receiving a grid penalty, etc.? What avenue do these competitors have after 2020? Would they receive Le Mans waivers but not allowed in WEC? I think the answer is we just don't know. I'm pretty certain that we'll see grandfathered current privateer cars, not just for the coming season, because that we know the current cars will carry into that, but the season after as well. And that's going to be principally because we're not, I don't think, going to be quite there in terms of the numbers in year one of the new regulations. We push forward into year two, and you'll have now seen the first of what I'm hoping will be several stories eking out in the coming weeks, which is that the good people at Ferrari are taking an active interest. And interesting to see MP that a number of other news outlets followed that story that we ran with DSC and Racer. And much as I think people would like to pour cold water on stories run by other people, they simply can't. The reality is there is active interest, no green light yet, but active interest in that one. As for the privateer cars, what do I expect? I expect that it will be less blunt than we've actually seen in the first year with the current mix of Toyotas versus the rest. I think it has to be somewhat less blunt. Do I think that they will be operating at some form of disadvantage? Well, it's going to be an odd one, isn't it? It's going to be interesting to see just how they take effectively 10 seconds out of those cars. It can be done with weight, it can be done with power restriction, it can be done with fuel mileage, etc. But it will be interesting to see what they do if and when those cars are grandfathered. Do I think it will be unfair? We've seen remarkable disparity in the past. The problem, I think, that we've got in the current scenario is there is only that one factory team. It's not the only time we've had that. Ask Henri Pescarolo how he was feeling back in the days when he was basically being beaten up by both the Audi factory team and a remarkable variety of privateers running Audi machinery. I think it's just a little too early to tell. I think we should start to hear a bit more clarity on what we're going to be looking at in terms of the outline grid for the top class in the WEC beyond next season, in the next weeks and very few months. I think we're going to start to see people telling us that they are committing and when they're committing to. And hopefully we should start to hear who the other big names are that are involved, and they are involved in those machinations. But I think we may have to be a little bit patient. As for just exactly what that balance of performance, EOT, call it what you will look like in 2020, 2021, my guess is we're not going to know that for well over another year yet.
There's also the practical aspect to that too, Graham, in that once we tick over to the new year, 2019, obviously, it will be, what shall we say, 20-ish months until the actual first car, hypercar, whatever it's called, race vehicles go under the green flag. But from a development standpoint, although that first green and checkered flag is roughly 20 months away, once we get to January 2019, it's a year. It's at least 1 year, 12 months, if not more, for a proper development cycle. Here's the idea. We're going to build it. We're going to submit the ideas, see what the ACO FIA say yes or no to. The rules give you the guidelines, but as we discussed in a recent episode, there are more questions to ask than maybe definitive things in that rule book. Get answers back, make the associated design changes, build a prototype, build prototypes of that, provided that is successful, do your crash testing and so on, get that certified. Then you've got your whole propulsion system, internal combustion, hybrid, blah, blah, blah. It's a long process. So just from a general, are we going to do it, are we not going to do it, no one has to announce
No.
anytime soon, but if there's true green lights going forward to start building these 2020 hypercars, it doesn't have to happen January 2019, Graham.
Nope.
But
No, it doesn't.
we're kind of in that, if you're going to do it, you want to kick it off here pretty darn soon.
But here's the bit to this equation that I think a lot of people have missed. We are, of course, obsessing a little about which of the big names are going to come. But there is a group of organisations that actually has a head start on that development process. And that's the people who are currently running LMP1 cars. And that, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, is not just Toyota, it's all of those privateers and their chassis manufacturers and their engine manufacturers. So, we already know that at least a couple of those are sniffing around the possibilities. The reality is they've got data, they've got aero work, they've got chassis work, they've got engine programs, they've got all of that good stuff going on. They've got tyre development programs going on. That don't be surprised if before you hear that insert name of exciting OEM 1, that Privateer 2, we've already heard by Collis taking on extra staff in hybrid engineering. That's not happening for no reason. The reality is I think you're going to see other programs emerging as the current Privateer cabal start to try to push their funders towards commitments to a longer term vision. Could that be what we see in year one of these regulations? Could it be Toyota against the minnows? That could be fun. In a very much more performance capped formula, that could be quite interesting too. So that's been a part of this that people haven't considered. Here's the ridiculous part, is actually I'll say it because they're there and they're the predominant player, the Orica Rebellion /TVR link could actually be closer to delivering a program than a major OEM without major expenditure, because those building blocks are already in place. Let's wait and see. It's going to require patience. I am excited by it. I think that's come across in the answers that I've been giving to a number of the questions over the last few weeks. But we've got a long way to go before we get shiny cars on the hallowed turf of the Le Mans 24 Hours, and for that matter, the WEC. I think it's going to be okay.
Oh, well, everybody, our tummies just got warm, hearing that everything will be okay. On the topic of Toyota, our friend Joe Campora says, Toyota has traditionally been funded and treated as an R&D project, Graham. With the new rules, our 2020 car rules, it begs the question as to why an R&D arm would even be interested. Do you anticipate funding being more reliant on the marketing department? And I would assume Joe's question is based on this is not extreme maximum engineering effort LMP1 hybrid, more of some kind of partial marriage to road car identity. Do you think that shifts the funding? Maybe not, and let's maybe not restrict this to Toyota, just in general for any, I would say, larger manufacturers looking in.
I hope it's a combination of both. To answer the question, Joe's absolutely spot on, by the way. It always has been an R&D program for Toyota. My latest conversation with this came with Pascal Vasselon, the technical director of the Toyota LMP1 program, and he made it very clear that, yes, this hypercar formula basically is almost like the pause button on the R&D program for what he described as being a short period of time. There's no doubt in my mind Toyota are eyeing a little further down the road, 2024, 2025, the zero emissions formula that is the next one that is planned to come along. They're already one of those big OEMs, original equipment manufacturers, that are already involved. I think we're first to bring a showroom available hydrogen fuel car to the marketplace. So this is part of a longer term strategy. They are through the Toyota Gazoo Racing sub-brand, because there are now a number of road cars branded with TGR, past one of the extraordinary looking Toyota Prius TGRs when we're on the way to the WEC race at Fuji. So this is a brand that they're investing in. Yes, Joe, I think you're going to see more marketing push behind that. I think that's good news for the program. I think it changes the dynamic of that program. But the R&D that would be going in while that's kind of happening and ticking along for 2, 3, 4 years will be going into the next giant leap, which is the zero emissions formula that at the moment we know a number of major manufacturers are looking at, which is half a decade away yet.
So, Graham, we're going to move to a question that's a little more wide-ranging, but definitely informational. This comes in from David Shutt, who says, what determines the Le Mans invites from IMSA? And I can just add up front that for those who might be curious, there are financial transactions that take place in order for any of the auto invites that are extended from IMSA to its competitors to participate at Le Mans. And that's not saying anything negative about our friends at the ACO. Just know that this is not being done strictly out of the kindness of their hearts. This is a money-making proposition. But how do we determine who gets those invites, Graham?
Well, as far as the IMSA field is concerned, there are 2 sorts of invitations that come IMSA's way, and potentially 3. So the first one, the automatic invitations, that doesn't mean a freebie. It means that you're definitely on the list. Go to the winners of the Bob Aiken Trophy and it's Truman and Aiken, isn't it? Truman and Aiken trophies, one for GTD and one for the prototype series to the top gentleman driver in, if I'm correct, it's NAEC, is it not?
I'm going to say a half-hearted yeah, and will also admit I should pay more attention to this. This falls into the, and look, I'm just honest. I don't give a crap about this. I don't. We paid money so that somebody gets an auto invite. Again, I probably should commit this to memory, but I don't give a fart.
But the reality is these are entries which are determined by IMSA. They've got that arrangement, which means that they can suggest 2 entries. That's the way they've determined that they will be allocated. That means against the rules, Misha Goikberg and Ben Keating were the recipients this year. We know that Misha Goikberg has handed his back. I tend to think that's a mistake on his part because I wonder whether or not he realised how valuable that might have been to an aspirant LMP2 team. But that entry, my understanding is that will now see the WeatherTech racing crew take up an entry. It's the only auto entry that effectively there's the opportunity to hand down should the first recipient decide not to go with it. That's the first possible way forward. The second way forward, and we've seen this increasingly in recent years, are for the professional factory-backed GT/LM teams to join their WEC partners on the grid for the Le Mans 24 Hours. That's been particularly valuable in recent years with the paucity of factory LMP1 entries. What does that mean? It means that these are the organisations that are spending no small amount of cash in the paddock at Le Mans. In other words, these are the people that bring the commercial side to the experience of, the fans, but particularly over and above that, the guests that would be brought in through the gates at the Le Mans 24 Hours. That's why those cars are coming, but it has given us all kinds of awesome in terms of the GTE Pro competition. The final one, the third one, is that, of course, any IMSA team with a prospect or a car that is relevant to the entry list for the Le Mans 24 Hours is perfectly able to submit an entry for the race and then go into the mix with the remainder of the teams that are doing exactly that, from the European Le Mans Series, maybe from Michelin Le Mans Cup, certainly from the Asian Le Mans Series. And they take their chances, and it may very well be that they feature either on the final entry or, I think more likely in these circumstances, because of where we are this coming year, on the reserve list. And I can tell you that there is at least one 2019 IMSA team that certainly have put in an entry for the 2019 Le Mans 24 Hours.
Ooh, Oh, look at that. Breaking exclusive scoop hashtag. All right, maybe not. Let's go to our friends at Reddit and the brilliant screen name of Effective Sprinkles, compared to Ineffective Sprinkles, I believe, to Graham. Is there any specific event or information that made you publish the Ferrari story now, instead of, for example, last week when you sort of teased us with it, you old tease, referring back to your days as a man earning a living on the stripper pole? I am aware you might not be able to answer this, but because you clearly said you don't publish just based on rumor, and I believe that, I'm having to stop myself from getting extremely excited. To see Ferrari back in the top class at Le Mans would be such a huge event. So, all right, what made you pull the trigger there? Goodwin?
I try not to use words could and should and might in stories like this. In this instance, this is a bit exceptional. The trigger was very simple. It was a third source and a third independent source. So 3 different people from 3 different avenues of the industry, all telling me more or less precisely exactly the same thing. And that's the bit that you've actually seen on Daily Sports Car. There's a little bit more still in the tank for that story. It may well be that we breathe a little bit more detail out in the days and weeks to come. But it comes down to, what are you hearing and from whom? And who is their source of that information? Rumour can be a dangerous thing. I don't care much about the kind of, as we first suggested might be the case back in insert month and year. The reality is everything is under review all the time. There are a million and one things that might happen. What gets me to the trigger point is the point at which I believe we're getting to the stage where the mists are clearing and there's a clear prospect ahead. That's what I think is facing Ferrari. That has been confirmed by some later revelations, as one or two of the other news organisations followed on from the stories on Daily Sports Car and Racer to get comment from the Ferrari family. I suspect that one or two of those people might have been a tad surprised not to have that story blown out the water, but to actually get to the point where they were basically saying exactly what we said, which is there's a way to go. It's not green lit. They are and always have been in the room and are actively considering a program moving forward. My belief is it's a little bit further on than that, and for very good reasons, not all of which are to do with the rule set that sits in front. As one or two of our questioners and the comments that have gone on from the Weekend Sports Cars MP and from the stories on Racer and on DSC is linking in to future prospects for what's going to happen about capping expenditure and the number of people that are involved with Formula One teams. You don't want to give that kind of expertise away. You might be looking for a good way to look at your return on investment by using that expertise in something that might give you a bit of punch. And I think this might very well be very close to the top of that list.
Ooh, a punchy Graham Goodwin answer. I love it. We need to find, I don't know where. I'm not going to forecast what. I'm hoping we have one of these questions that will trigger at least one soapbox moment. Yeah, I feel like we're doing ourselves and our listeners a disservice if we don't find at least one thing to jump up and down upon. Let's go to SRA Smoking Puppy 841 from Twitter. As was discussed a couple of weeks ago, there will only be around 10 normal entries available for Le Mans in 2019. Would you like to see a revision to the automatic entry system so that more, quote, normal entries, and lots of them, are available? If so, what changes would you make? And I love that question and completely agree.
Absolutely. Number one, there has already been a change, and that will come to the European Le Mans Series this coming season, where the top 2 LMP2 teams will be invited with an automatic entry for the 2020 race. And I think that's quite correct. This is a difficult one, and I'm kind of drawn between two camps here. Do I think it's fair that you've got teams spending a lot of money on LMP2 programs and being somewhere in the middle of a very, very long list? For that matter, GTE teams? No, I don't. But we're in an extraordinary kind of time, and there's 2 factors. We've mentioned one, which is that because there's not those factory LMP1 teams, the value to the race and to the commercial case for the race comes with the GTE factory teams. That's where the big money gets spent. And the reality is there are more of those GTE cars than there were LMP1 cars, which means that they're taking up more of the slack. The second part of it, and that's the case for 2018, it will be again in 2019, is we've got quite a large WEC entry this year. Potentially 36. It won't be 36 by the time we get to June, I'm sure of that. But that means that more of those entries are already taken because, of course, with a WEC entry, you get that Le Mans entry. You then get into looking at which of the auto entries you might dispense with. And it's got to be said, whichever way you cut it, there is a good reason behind allocating those entries. One of the ones that was mentioned to me repeatedly was that the Michelin Le Mans Cup, which is the LMP3 GT3 support series for the LMS, that attracts an auto entry for the Le Mans 24 Hours for the GT winner, champion, but not for the LMP3 champion. And the case being made there is that perhaps either the LMP3 winners should get the entry or the GT entry shouldn't. Looking at that in isolation, though, every winner of that auto entry has gone on to graduate from GT3 in the Michelin Le Mans Cup to GT AM or GTE in the ELMS, and in one case now into the WEC. Put simply, that's an auto entry that is delivering exactly what it was designed to do. As for the LMP3 team winning, no, they should be aspiring towards the ELMS. I get it in terms of bolstering the GTE audience, and the reality is that has worked. The other one that is often mentioned is the fact that we've got 4 entries through the Asia Le Mans series. This year, you've seen a influx of European teams going to try to win their entries fair and square through Asia. That is helping to grow that product. Again, if what you're interested in is something beyond just the Le Mans 24 Hours, but building the product, building the pyramid, building those stepping stones towards the FIWEC and the Le Mans 24 Hours, again, that looks like it's working. I think give it a couple of years to kind of to bed in. Let's look at what the size of the WEC entry is in 2019, 2020 and beyond, with those unknowns around what hypercar effect might have on the GTE programs. And I think at that point, you can start to think about what your strategy might be. At the moment, we're in an extraordinary position where we've got a really sticky year in 2019. And I think we're going to see some very high-profile teams really disappointed in June. And there's going to be some wailing and gnashing of teeth as a result.
Ooh, Bob Marley wailing and gnashing of teeth would be even better. Should also mention, we often provide little in-episode timestamps. We're not doing that this episode. We don't know how long it's going to take.
Nope.
It could be less than the 90 minutes or so we try to get to. It could be a Pruitt 90 minutes, which is something in the 24-hour range. We don't know. But again, this is our overtime episode where we are getting to all the questions we did not field from the most previous episode. Let's go to our pal, and I think I'm just going to sing his name from now on. Stathis Coco! Our man Stathis sends in this from Twitter. Given the latest news that we've seen during the last week about mid-season entries, will the ACO and FIA put a rule in place to make manufacturers do 2 to 3 races before Le Mans, preventing them from doing only the big one before Season 2? Also, is it a bit early for tech questions? Other random questions here. Why the cars must weigh more, almost 10 seconds slower than the current ones? And is this sudden huge interest attracting others? Cough, cough, Audi, cough, cough. So, a couple of different things in here. And they're all yours.
Well, Status, I know, is I presume talking about the stories that have been around that Zach Brown has now been talking about whether or not McLaren might come a little earlier than perhaps he was suggesting they might. I think the McLaren thing is quite simple. He's got to sort out their Formula One team. Without that being sorted, I can't see that they're going to commit the funding for a second parallel program from that side of the McLaren empire. I think that has to get sorted first. So I think what Zach's comments were pretty aspirational. As for whether or not they're going to buy into the Le Mans 24 Hours, let's put it this way. If a major organisation like McLaren puts a current rules car out for any of the season, I think you'll see them in the following year's Le Mans, whether or not as a WC entry or as an invitational entry. Make no mistake, this is where the ACO wants their product to be at the top end for the next half a decade or more. So it's a bit different. It is another transition. God, we seem to be in a permanent transition from one set of rules to another. But I would expect that if whatever factory turns up, even mid-season, I expect them to be at the Le Mans 24 Hours the following year. At the end of that WEC season, because frankly, that's what the car is designed to do. It's there to headline the big races. As for the tech questions, why must the cars weigh more? Well, the cars, from memory, are physically bigger. For starters, it's a bigger greenhouse for the cockpit. Remember that there's hybrid systems on those cars. They are not the kind of super high tech vertical development curve stuff that we've been used to with the Porsches, the Audis, and the Toyotas. This is something altogether more commercially accessible. Hence, you must provide your hybrid powertrain to insert X number of teams, etc. So again, it gives you the opportunity to make that a more accessible aspiration. Is the sudden interest attracting others? No doubt it's attracting others. Whether or not that turns into real programs, as MP was just saying, I think we won't know for many, many months yet. But I think we've got two transitions underway at the same time. The first is now into hypercar. We're a couple of years away from that being a real thing in terms of a potential full grid of those cars. And then beyond that, the manoeuvring of the makes towards making regulations on zero emissions. And there, we've already heard in the background from BMW and about their aspirations towards that. Certainly Audi have been talking semi-publicly about that. Zero doubt that's where we are with Toyota as well. And I have no doubt whatsoever that once you put those three titans in the frame, there are other aspirant manufacturers that would think, I fancy taking their crown, and let's see what happens there. But the weight thing, this is all about this complete change in mindset about how you balance that class. It's not, build the fastest car and we'll balance it back. It is, here's the template. Here's what your engine must produce. Here's what your hybrid system must produce. Here's the weight. Here's the dimensions. Here are the aerodynamic restrictions you've got. And by the way, if by some kind of black magic you manage to exceed what we believe that will achieve, we'll be reeling you back in. This is about accessible performance to a restricted potential budget.
Meow. All right. Well, let's go to, where should we go? Well, we're done, by the way, with ACO.
Oh, let's talk IMSA. I like talking IMSA.
No, I've never heard such a preposterous suggestion.
Wonderful people.
Okay.
The Americans, always good for a laugh.
Americans. Your turn to play questionnaire, my friend.
It is. Well, let's start with Douglas Holtzman, who's one of our Facebook questioners. Seems there are a few teams that were originally only doing GTD sprints, now decided to move into full schedule. How many do you think will run just sprints? Is he mistaken, Douglas, or is GTD growing, and what is the reason? I think it's fair to say this was something of a surprise, MP.
Complete surprise. I was mentioning to someone else just earlier this week, there's a point about midway 2018 where looking at how at least the dynamic here, maybe it takes place in other championships, but those who've had a fairly poor start to the season say, is there any real reason to show up for the rest of the season? They kind of reach that point where they go, all right, well, that championship we wanted, that isn't happening, or other things that we might do to prove that we've had a successful time, not happening. Better to cut our losses. Saw, at least for me, what appeared to be a slight downturn in GTD entries and just subscription, and was curious as to whether it was a blip or whether there would be a recovery. And, oh yes, Doug, there has been a very solid recovery, and that has been, boy, everything IMSA has needed. Again, as I mentioned to someone else earlier this week in a podcast, GTD is IMSA's canary in the coal mine. That is the class where if you want a true feel for how the series is doing on a business front and how really you have a case of, is this thing healthy? Can folks make a living? Can folks put cars on track? That's going to be found and determined in GTD. And so the fact that we are going into the Roar and then the Rolex 24 with 23 GTD cars, effectively half of the entries, there's 47 entries, but yeah, more or less half of the field will be GTD. That I think is just phenomenal. And the thing that I like about this, and I wasn't exactly sure if it was going to be the case, Graham, is, of course, for the Rolex, we're going to get some extra entries. That's a bit of a celebratory open to the season with Daytona followed directly by Sebring. But what are we going to have for the full season? And that's where I am truly heartened to see that there is a strong interest in the class. Not saying crazy, not saying huge, oh my goodness, type numbers, but it is just for hashtag me personally, very, very awesome to see that so many new teams are coming in from PFAF, P-F-A-F-F, coming over from the Pirelli World Challenge Series, having had a lot of success there with young Canadian team, but with young Canadian driver Scott Hargrove. It's great to see that more speeds coming in. We've got Compass 360 coming in, or I'm sorry, Compass Racing coming in. We've got a number of teams, just either new teams or teams that are new to IMSA coming in with full season plans. Some of those, as Douglas mentioned, went from, hey, we're going to do the lower commitment, the Sprint Cup commitment, which strips out all of the endurance races, to, oh, okay, and actually now that we've announced, we've either had a driver or sponsors or something come along and say, oh, all right, great, but hey, why not do the whole thing? That, to me, on the canary in the coal mine front, you go, all right, oxygen is solid, things are good, we're not dropping off here. Of course, we'd love to see, a little bit more strength in a few places. Haven't heard what Wright Motorsports is going to do, right? They were in with a two-car program. I'm not totally believing that they're going to be back at IMSA, but we hope to hear that they will. We'd love to see Bill Riley with 2 or 3 more cars under his tent. So, there's still, not everything's positive, but I would say for sure, Graham, there's been a very healthy uptick. Jackie Heinricher signing on for a full season with her all-female effort with Meyer Shank Racing and such. There's just lots of little things where you go, awesome. Things seem to be working here. Of course, budgets could be reduced. There's a lot of things that could be improved, but you don't get a lot of teams signing on if things were headed in the wrong direction. The last quick thing I'll add to this, and it's not meant to be a dig, it's just meant to be an acknowledgement of reality. We're seeing a bit of a small reaction at this point, but it could grow to where the Blancpain GT World Challenge America series is headed in its full SRO-ification. And some entries, some entrants, some drivers heading over to IMSA with not exactly sure plans as to what the series formerly known as Pirelli World Challenge is going to look like. That's a good thing if you want stability, because Graham, for the most part, IMSA is going to be IMSA. It's going to be the same thing next year and the year after. So we might be seeing a little bit of that shakeout here too.
Well, oddly enough, the next question, because almost all of our questions, are remaining questions on IMSA, do surround that GTD, GT3 kind of family. And the next one from LB Greg 310 is from our USCR Reddit group, and another relatively new addition to where we're gathering questions from. And Greg, I presume is Greg, says, keep up the great work, guys. Who are your picks for GTD Sprint and Endurance Champions? And also, he adds, have you heard from any teams about potential plans to enter Blancpain GT, Pirelli World Challenge Race America GT Series by Stefan Rattel?
Yeah, I thought we were calling it Blank Face or Blank Stare or some. Yeah. I also had a friend affiliated with the series who said, maybe a series sponsored by something that translates as white pain might strike some folks in America as a little bit odd as well. To which I said, I never thought of that. You're a smart monkey. Champs. Boy, that... I am a horrible prognosticator of prognostication. This is a well-known fact. I must say, I know that they are a, quote, rookie team, that they're a new team, but they're not really new. I love the look. I'm just going to throw out a couple for the full season. I love the look of the Starworks team. They, having been the strong arm, but somewhat non-named arm behind the Monteplas by Land Audi effort, I think there is some real solid stuff that could happen there. If, this is just an if, the BOP is one that allows Porsche to be more competitive. The 73 Park Place Motorsports effort with Pat Long and Patrick Lindsay stands out as a holy cow. Again, BOP related, what's going on at Scuderia Corsa. Wow, that's a crazy driver lineup. I'd say Magnus as well. Magnus Racing switching over to the Lamborghini. That could be a very serious contender. And I'd also say, coming back to Riley, this unit of Ben Keating and Jaron Bleekemolen, that just, again, a lot of this stuff is BOP based. But provided we have, say, more or less equal opportunities throughout the season, it's hard for me to pick one, because I would say, another element to the 2019 GTD class, Graham. This is the strongest I've ever seen it in terms of driver quality, pairing quality, right? There's not just more amazing drivers coming into the class, but also the strength of pairings as well. This is something where last year, I don't know if we were pointing to the Paul Miller Racing team as the one, but they kind of felt I think most folks knew it was going to be somewhere between a Paul Miller, Riley, Mercedes AMG, something in that range, and that's kind of sort of what it ended up being. This year, I'd say we'd have to extend that reasonable championship expectation out to maybe 5 cars, and that's awesome. As for the Sprint Cup, I truly have no idea. I need to burrow in a little bit more to see exactly who is going to be opting in for that, to really give an answer that isn't just pulling out of my backside.
Well, there you go. Let's not get you to pull anything out your backside. That would be unpleasant and unnecessary, I think, at this point of the season. Going back, though, another question, this time from Patrick Thomas, another of our Facebook questioners, another IMSA GTD question asking, Compass Racing are basically the first team, I believe the first team worldwide to declare a program for the fabulous-looking McLaren 720S GT3. I saw that car racing incredibly convincingly at the Golf 12 Hours. 10 hours of absolutely fault-free running until a damper spoiled their day. Failed damper pushing the car a little bit further down the order. But Compass Racing will bring the first customer car to IMSA competition. Patrick asks, will the team have to shell out for the manufacturer's franchise fee? Would they not have to pay, given that McLaren already has a couple of GT4s in the GS category of the Michelin Pilot Challenge? That would be another Compass car, wouldn't it? And Motorsports in Action.
I would have to just take a stab at this, Patrick. I mean, as often as I ask for teams and manufacturers to send me their contracts, they are not as accommodating as I would like. Knowing that McLaren has been in IMSA, I would not foresee there being any kind of grand requirement for Compass to do anything in order to race their car. Could there be an expansion or heightening of the financial commitment, knowing that it's not just what it was formerly known as the Continental Tire Series, now the Michelin Series? Knowing that they're not going to be restricted to IMSA's second-tier class, but also the top tier. I'm sure that there will be extra dollars involved. I don't believe Compass would be the ones, though, having to spend that. And also tying back to what Graham mentioned just a little while ago about McLaren and so much of what is going on there between the obviously ongoing F1 program, the Indy 500 effort, the future DPI, who knows what we're going to call it, DPI, maybe car, maybe both, who knows. It's pretty clear that McLaren as a racing organization, and also now branching out on the road car side more than Zach Brown had originally said would happen, it's clear that there's just an overarching, let's do it, let's go race, let's remind folks that we are a racing company that makes road cars, not a road car company that also makes race cars. So I would assume, I would make an ass out of you and me here, Patrick, that if extra dollars were required, that McLaren would indeed be more than happy to pony up for that.
Yeah, I think you may well be right. We've got a couple more left on our IMSA list. Well, first one is from Adam Lavender from Twitter, who says, with the influx of interest, could we be looking at IMSA limiting participants in the first two races of the season, those being, of course, the Rolex 24 Hours of Daytona, the 12 Hours of Sebring? If so, what priority would they give entrants? First come, first serve. I presume this is the kind of guest entries that traditionally we see at effectively what we now call the Florida 36 Hours, isn't it, MP?
Yeah, I don't foresee any issues in the opening rounds where we start to get into potential issues, knowing that IMSA announced this week that we have 47 cars entered for Roar/Rolex 24 in January, 37 for the full season, and then again we have a couple that are going to be added on for, I think, 4 or 5 or so for the GTD Sprint Cup. The communication that they sent out here was not just to tell the world, hey, people love us, and boy, there's great subscription, Adam. There was an intent behind it as well to say, if you're wanting to get in and you want to be a part of this, don't fart around. And it wasn't just the Rolex 24. There's a mandatory requirement to participate in the Roar test if you're going to race. So for those who might miss that, fine. But what their underlying message was, if you want to be a part of this full season in particular, even part-time, tell us now. Because if you're coming to us in February or March, we might have a need to say no and or tell you, okay, thanks, we can have you here and here, but not here, and there, but not those two, because there are some facilities, the lovely MoSport, a.k.a. Canadian Tire Motorsports Park, is one. WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca can accommodate, I believe it's pit lane, can accommodate 42 cars. And since that would be a sprint GTD round, if we look at the 37 full-time, the roughly 4 to 5 Sprint Cup editions for GTD, we're kind of already maxed out there. So it's more of a, if you want to play, let us know now so we can try and see what we can figure out for you, instead of showing up later in the year and we might not be able to accommodate, or in whatever instance, we might be able to let you in for a couple of races, but that might not be what you were hoping to do, therefore you're going to be disappointed. So I think that's more the mindset, Adam. As for first come, first serve, there's always the what you're going to do for me mindset, and no one will admit to that, nor should they, but any series would have to question, all right, what is it that you are bringing? Are you just a small, underfunded team that wants to come and play and probably maybe might not be back, or do you have a large sponsor that is going to be enriching the series by being there? Drivers that might attract more people to the gate. So, of course, any racing series does not want to admit that, but yes, if they have to pick and choose, they're certainly going to look at the ones and say, who's going to do us the most good? Not necessarily just financially, but are you going to make our show more popular or put more people through the turnstiles to be there compared to some others that might not?
Absolutely right. It's a regular question I get asked by race teams looking to attract attention. What do we have to do to make that next bit of difference? And there's a range of answers you can give. We've got one more on the IMSA side. I have to say, it's one I've got a vague recollection of. I'm hoping you've got more of a recollection of this than I do, which was some iced coffee, one of our USCR Redditors, and asking Mr. Goodwin, Mr. Pruitt, can you go into any detail about the failed ADR Delta Action Express partnership that was supposed to lead to a generic Corvette DP bodywork? There was renders of what they were supposed to look like. He's never heard anything other than it wasn't going to happen. Just really wants to know what it looked like. I do remember this story.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. This brings a little smile to my face. So this was fun. In virtual terms, apparently the ADR Delta folks had done some work, or again, this is working off of recollection compared to pulling up old stories, so apologies there, but that outfit had done work for Coyote as a Daytona prototype.
That's it, yeah.
Manufacturer, had done the body for them. This is prior to the Corvette DP being launched, something along those lines.
This wasn't Corvette, was it? This was a generic Coyote body.
Correct.
That's correct. Right. Yeah.
And it did not look bad. It was a little boat. There's, a little boaty compared to tacky. But yeah, I would say did a fine job with that. There was a goal then to do, as you mentioned, to try and create their own separate Coyote-type property. And while I was never given the renderings and had asked, and there was a point in time where it looked like they might send them to me, Action Express team manager and president or CEO of Coyote Cars, Gary Nelson, did show me the renders of this generic-ish bodywork on his phone at Sebring. And he told me I couldn't talk about it for a little while. But it looked pretty darn good. And he told me that at least through through CFD, through virtual wind tunnel testing, that the numbers were coming back pretty good and they were pretty happy with it and so on. I think, again, had the DP formula continued compared to what we have now with DPI, I think they might have had some takers for those that were not just strictly affiliated with a Ford, with a Corvette, and so on. I think it could have filled a void, and folks would have liked what it looked like. But yeah, it never really got beyond that, and I still... here's the other thing which I do remember. About a year later, after Gary told me, whenever he told me, all right, yeah, this isn't happening, I just remember it came to mind about a year later, and I dropped him an email, I think, said, hey, now that this thing's been dead for a long time, can you at least show me, email me the render so I can blow it up and really look at stuff? And he said, no. Like, all right, well, thanks, man. So who knows? Maybe I need to make another run at Gary and say, look, brother, this tube frame DP formula, it's been dead for 5 years or however many years now, a couple of years. Just show me the dang thing. I think he probably might. I also have, by the way, okay, this is an admission of guilt, Graham. I feel guilty about this. I looked on my hard drive yesterday, and I have, between a couple of theme shows that I have to do full production on, podcast shows, like Who the Hell Are You Season 2, and also the So You Want to Be a Blank in Racing, the vocational series. if you add in those two, plus all of the other regular podcasts that I need to produce, plus some of the other, I don't want to say special ones, but I've got a couple editions of the strangest cars I've raced. One with Perry McCarthy, the 92 Andrea Moda F1 car.
Oh, yeah.
Scott Pruitt on the 1987 Maxim GTP car. Let's see, I have a Wyatt Failed episode with Scott Pruitt again on the 92 True Sports IndyCar chassis. I'm just looking here. Got a couple of classic racing stories that I haven't wheeled out. One with Stefan Johansson on the 1987 Austrian GP Deer Strike in his McLaren. One from Tony Kanaan with Ayrton Senna at Hockenheim in 93. Altogether, I think I have about 110 podcasts.
Wow.
Just sitting on the hard drive that I have to produce. Some of these dating back to 2016.
Good grief.
Yeah. So I don't know why. I just felt the need to say that. But A, I'm sorry. And B, one of those, which I captured in September at WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca, was with Gary Nelson, My Racing Life and Career, and the Action Express team manager and former NASCAR champion and former NASCAR technical director. One of my favorite episodes of anything that I've captured. So just looking forward to getting that out. And for those who are wondering how my mind works, you can tell that we mentioned Gary Nelson, which triggered a memory that I had My Racing Life and Career episode to put up from him that I haven't, and then felt the need to explain that I have about 100 plus podcasts just waiting to be produced. It's a scary trip through my brain.
Well, let me help Ice Coffee in one regard. December the 6th, 2013, I've just had a quick look back in the archive for racer.com, and there is a story there that talks about the general look of that car. So do take a look at that. I suspect that's the closest you're going to get to a visual for now, at least.
What did that idiot write on Racer about it? I'm curious.
Now you're asking. It says... looks different to what most of them look like, doesn't it? Final shape kept under wraps. Tall rake nose, low sloped side pods remain unchanged. Coyote might have one of the most distinctive LMP looking DPs on the marketplace, it says here, amongst other things.
Wow, that Pruitt guy's...
So let's wait and see.
All right.
We're going to move on into our general category, which is, we're kicking on through these. We've got generals and we've got the funnies. By the way, again, thanks to young Ryan Kish, who put together these in a beautiful way for us this time. And I think we'll be attempting to assist us to get to be a little more organised with these in the future. I'll be having a chat with Ryan into the new year. Alex Eichenmiller, re-asking a question from last week, he says, we hear the argument for driver rankings being that they will lose drivers if they have to go against pros, if BOP works. So that's driver rankings and BOP in the first three lines of a question. Well done there.
All right. Thank you for listening to this week's Week in Sports podcast. Okay.
It should negate better funded drivers from out-developing gentleman teams. Comes down to driver ability. Who are the AMs that have complained about going against pros and threat to take their toys and go home if we don't have driver rankings? Is this just a straw man argument, or there are AMs that have gone on record about this? If so, name names, please.
I love the fact that you've asked this. This is great.
Yeah. I'm going to have a first crack at this one. And it's a story I've told before, but it informed me greatly about the way in which this marketplace works. And it's a story about David Heimer Hansen, an extremely good gentleman driver. And David, I think, is one of those guys that is slightly torn about this, in that if you're going to promise it's Pro-Am and then you turn up having paid a not inconsiderable amount of money, and then you've got guys coming in who are not really the non-professional drivers, kicking your ass week in, week out, while you're paying a seven-figure sum for a season, then that ain't fair. But he equally well reflects that at some point decisions have been made by race promoters and race organisers that gentleman drivers, non-professional drivers, have been made a promise through the driver ranking system that they will be competitive for championship honours. And he's right. That is what that is there to do. So there is this disparity between them. That's not, by the way, putting all of this at David's feet. He is one of the guys that I've taken time more than once down through the years to talk through these issues. And the points he raises are absolutely valid. There may well be faults in having made those promises in the first place, but those promises were made. That's why the driver ranking system exists.
Okay, I feel a soapbox moment here. I completely disagree. There is absolutely nothing about the driver ratings system that guarantees an amateur will be competitive. There's a guarantee that there will be a structure in place where an amateur in Pro-Am classes will have the potential of being competitive, but that is strictly a blind ratings alignment, meaning I'm just hypothetical. In this Pro-Am class, you must have one pro, one amateur, period. Throughout the entire class, 1 and 1. And let's say, for example, there's an option for either a silver or bronze on the amateur compared to saying it must be a silver. If that's the case, if David, for example, happens to be a very good race car driver, there are others who will bear his same driver rating who are not as capable. Therefore, the rating system does not guarantee a damn thing. It just says that you must have this driver rating in a car, and you must have that driver rating in a car. Everyone go play. There's nothing in a driver rating system that takes into account talent. And therefore, that's where I believe Alex is definitely onto something here, and I've been of the exact agreement. It is a straw man's argument. I get the fact where, hey, they're sneaky silvers, right? There are true pros being misappropriated as amateurs. That is a fault of the ratings board.
Correct.
Whether it's ACO, FIA, or if we're talking more regional with IMSA saying we're going to, again, I'm not trying to point at any one sanctioning body in their decision making, but for those who are placed in the wrong category, then that is problematic. If I'm a DHH and I have just spent my not inconsiderable sum and I have a silver rating and I'm looking at a guy next to me going, wait a minute, I grew up idolizing you, or I grew up wanting to be you, and you're either a past champion, you're a whatever, and you're now a silver because of your age maybe, or say the last couple of years you haven't been in a high caliber program, therefore you've not had the results to leave you in that pro status. Now you're positioned as an amateur, but we all know you're a pro. Can't argue there. But someone believing that, hey, I'm not a pro. I've been given a non-pro rating. Therefore, I should have an equal chance of success at any championship. Any driver who does believe that is a damn fool, because talent and skill and making oneself better, that's something that no ratings board can accommodate for.
I think the other problem that comes into this, and we've seen it in very sharp focus in recent weeks, is we then get into the other aspect of this, which is it seems to be an increasing tendency for the race organising bodies to then take their own view on what should have happened. We saw this with Madison Snow. We've seen it elsewhere in the recent past. That's when this starts to come apart at the seams. That's when you either put your trust in that driver ranking system or you don't. Where is the level playing field? Is the level playing field that there is a system and that you actually roll with the punches that that system actually deals out? Or is there always that get-out-of-jail-free card that says, yeah, there's that system, but then we'll take our own view? Because there'd be dragons there, surely, MP. There'd be dragons around whether or not politics comes into play. That's what concerns me here moving forward. Not only have you got the potential flaws that sit with any formulaic system, because clever people will always find their way around that, but then you get into the commercial aspects here. That means that a race organizer has got that get out of jail free card, the big red button on the desk that says no. That's where I think there potentially might be problems further down the line.
And let me just apply a little bit of time-honored view on this, and again, disregard your mileage may vary, etc., etc. Having been a mechanic, or pick whatever team-based role, having been someone who has worked with many amateur drivers, sometimes in a pro-am dynamic, sometimes in a single-seater dynamic, right? It could be an open-wheel thing, but where the person who is competing and spending the money to compete is not a pro, not just in rating or general reference, but their talent level just is not there, nor will it be. More often than not, in what I experienced growing up as a young mechanic in those situations was, I'm here because I love this. I want to do it. I do not expect a sanctioning body to shape its rules to try and coddle me, shift and shape things so that despite my lack of talent to succeed, you've created a structure where, because I'm a small business owner, I'm a person maybe funding part, half, or all the team or otherwise, I can be made to feel like I'm a pro. So the thing where I framed my views on this, Graham, was very much akin to the rock and roll fantasy event. Hey, I have been playing the guitar for a couple of years, and I can pay $2,000 to go on a cruise or go to some, event for the week where I get to hang around with Joe Walsh and Steve Vai and a few other, well-known super axe men on the guitar, and I can play in a little band with them. We're going to do a couple of songs, and I'll get some lessons and such. And you go, great, that's awesome. But you're not them. And so they seem to understand that. They love the fact that they can flirt and play in the world of the true pros, grasp that their life is not destined for one of guitar-based stardom, but they either have the money or the enough talent to be able to pay money to be in their general sphere, but not actually belong to that club. And maybe this is a harsh statement, but that's never changed for me in that type of view with either pro-am based racing when it comes to the amateurs, or in open wheel racing with those who love to be there, but who we would say, hey, Milka Duno, she's racing an IndyCar. Wow, I realize that there's 24 cars on the grid, but they've actually slotted her in 47th position because that's how far behind she is. Fair enough. You got the money and you have the minimum capabilities of being on track to meet the requirements to get a license in play. Awesome. But any thought for me of, but I would please now shape your organization or your rules to make me someone who does not possess the skill or talent on just pure merit alone to run up front and be competitive and win. I don't buy into that. I never have. I love the fact that we have, in motorsports and sports car racing in general, has always had a heavy, call it pro-am dynamic, wealthy businessman, wealthy businesswoman, non-pro element. That's the core of the sport in sports cars. It really, truly is and always has been. But the thought of trying to then shape things to make things, quote, equal or as equal as possible, that doesn't exist in nature. I mean, truly, if you just stood if you stood Ben Keating next to Jaron Bleekemolen, you go, yeah, I'm picking Jaron every time. This guy's phenomenal. Ben has become amazingly good for what he is. Would he ever be hired to lead a team? No. Would he be the person that you place to fight against, pick any of the other, and Andy Lally over the last 5 laps at wherever? Not a chance ever. And that's not being critical of Ben. That's just stating that we are all born with different levels of talents and things that we do. And I just find it asinine, coming back to Alex's question, that if there are, and there have been some, pro-am drivers, amateur gentlewomen drivers, who have looked upon a series to try and balance what nature has said is not in balance. So I guess we just found our first soapbox item. Woo!
We did, and I think coming roaring in as a potential question of the week there as well on the basis of that. But right, Jerry Lawless is one of our Twitter commenters here. Says he enjoys watching sports cars as much as NASCAR, Formula One, MotoGP, etc., and would enjoy it more if he understood the alphabet soup of sports car racing across the globe. Different classes, series everywhere. Is there somewhere that will explain it to me like I'm a third grader? Good luck, I think is the answer there, Jerry. When you've got to the stage where there is probably no class of racing anywhere on the planet that has got as many active cars as GT3. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds in just about every active racing market. Just off the top of my head, okay, GT3 is variously described or indeed included within classes that are called Class A, Bathurst, GT300, Super GT, GT, in ACO World Racing in the Asia Le Mans Series and Michelin Le Mans Cup, GTD, IMSA, SP9, VLN and the Nürburgring 24 Hours, and there will be many, many more besides. So there's not a lot of hope, I'm afraid. This all comes down to having to fit someone else's template, someone else's marketing, etc. It does prompt me to actually do some form of sports car racing 101. I've done this before many years ago, but I think probably we're long overdue to do this one again. I completely agree with you, by the way. There is nonsense in various of these places, around what it is you call it. Sometimes it's because there is actually trademarking of GT4, for instance, which is an SRO product. That means that if you toddle along to the GT Open website and look at their new sub-series, support series for 2019, nowhere will you see the moniker GT4, because despite the fact that that is aimed at Cup class, single make and GT4 machinery, you will not see GT4 applied there because it's not licensed by the SRO to include cars which are applicable to the GT4 rule set. With that comes a bill. With the balance of performance that goes with that comes another bill. So there are commercial reasons why these things are called different things in different places. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. That actually, there goes profitability and sustainability, neither of which, by the way, are bad things in racing. But I do tend to agree with you. All I would say is that for the principal series that are around the world, whether or not in North America with IMSA and Pirelli World Challenge, whether or not it's in the ACO realms with the WEC, with ELMS, with the Asia Le Mans Series and the Michelin Le Mans Cup. Generally speaking, there are ladies and gentlemen who are like-minded. They get it that this is a difficult thing to access. Ask questions, engage with them through the opportunity to do so with Twitter and with Facebook. For the most part, in this day and age, they generally do that. Ask the question, you will get an answer, because we do get it that this is a form of the sport that does need intellectual investment to get the very best out of.
Well, Graham, this just reminds me that we've been threatening to do this. We need to do a Sports Car 101 episode of trying to explain all the different series that compete on a global basis, how they are interconnected, and their origins. And I'm fearful that if we try and do it on our own, we're going to fail massively. So maybe that will be another call for questions. Hey, what do you want to know? What do you need to know? What are you curious about? And we will do our best to tell you things that aren't completely silly. Where should we go next in our questions? Are we winding down even? Instead of me giving the status update.
You know what? Nowhere even close. We've got a few more on the general things and lots of fun and off-topic stuff to finish with. Let's rattle for you a few quick ones. Dave Stillwell, who's a name I recognised, I wasn't quite sure why, but the question explained to me why. It basically says, asking around Ford Racing and Multimatic built the Mustang FR 500C for 2005. Early days of GT4. Up the game with the 500 GT in 2006. Originally intended for the US domestic series, it found a home as an FI GT3 homologated car a little later. asking how many of those cars were built, I actually don't know, is the honest answer. Where are they now? Absolutely don't know, but I'm guessing a lot of them are now in private collections or in track day service. Wondering how many of the updated 2010 on-styling transactional IRS-equipped Mustang VDS cars that did get into some troubles with their homologation. I do recall that were built as well, where they ended up. Their efforts are on track at the same time as the Maytech 4 GTs. Still to this day, he believes have the best sounding GT3 exhaust notes, courtesy of the Roush Yates V8. Regards, Dave from Australia. Fell hard for these cars. They built one for themselves. I think your car is a red car, and I think I've seen that car, or rather more, Dave heard that car in some action. The answer there is, that was a really odd time in the homologation cycle in GT3. The Maytech side, which ended, I'm afraid, very sadly with the untimely death of the founder of Maytech. But the Mustang never really showed what I think it was capable of. I think the VDS guys took a leap into that independent rear suspension, the transactional equipped side of things, and fell foul of regulations. But I agree with you; those things looked amazing, absolutely looked astonishing, but never really found the regulatory approval and the commercial oomph that was needed to break through what was then an emerging marketplace of customer sports funded investment into GT3 racing, which saw that explosion of cars from the likes of Audi, Mercedes-AMG, Ferrari, Lamborghini through Reiter Engineering, and then latterly through with the Huracan, the Squadra Corsa efforts. I don't know where those cars are. I haven't seen one of them for some time. I seem to recall that the Maytech GT1 versions of those cars were sold as a job lot into North America and then sold on from there through a good friend of mine. And I seem to recall as well that the VDS Mustangs went in a similar vein to a single buyer. And I don't think there were very many of those cars, but would love to hear from anybody that wants to write in and tell us what they know about the future of those cars. A lost chapter almost in GT3 racing, where we've seen hundreds of those cars come forward from there on MP. Well, another GT3 car actually comes into focus here. Tom Bender from Facebook asks, and he says he won't give up on this question, by which I think he means, he says it's his third attempt. With the BMW M6 GT3 not really being a success, yeah, it will inspire. We don't see many customers racing the car. In most series, we just see one or two BMWs racing against Audis, Mercedes, Porsche. Question is, do you guys think that they will build a new GT3 car rather sooner than later? The new Z4 could be a good car for this, and they could also work with Toyota, now teasing a super race car, which would be an awesome addition to the already impressive GT3 field. Right, well, what can I tell you about this? Number one, we've got at least one new customer effort in 2019. That is the first entry into the British GT Championship of an M6 GT3 with Century Motorsport, the GT4 champions, stepping up with the GT3 effort. I agree with you. The customer sport efforts for the M6 have not been as successful as the Audi or the AMG efforts. That might be less to do with the product and more to do with the infrastructure that surrounds it. Let's wait and see what actually comes forward. As for the new Z4 and Supra, well, I can tell you the Toyota plan for that car is GT4, not GT3. And that's probably a more realistic outlet for what lies beneath the bodywork of those cars. So if there's going to be anything coming from BMW's current customer version for their GT4 course sits with the M4 GT4, and very successful that is too. There has been that Evo kit that has seen the M6 be rather more competitive, but it's all about this balance of performance again. And it does seem to me that the M6 GT3 has got that narrower envelope than perhaps some of those packages. But let's see what emerges from BMW's customer sports department. They've got the M235i Racing, they've got the M4 GT4, the M6 GT3, and obviously now the M8 GTE 4 products, which is the first one in line to be replaced. My guess is it might well be the GT3 effort, but I not got any real tack on whether or not that's going to happen anytime soon.
maybe if we've got the M8, the Mate GTE,
the Mate,
I don't know,
mate,
is
mate.
is M10, if we're just, looking at 6, 8, 10, I don't know if that's what we're destined to here, but let's see, where shall I take us, my friend? This is a little bit of an interesting one. Neil Hardy from Twitter says the 2018 season is now over and 2019 is only a few weeks away in Dubai. Which drivers do you think have improved the most this year and be the ones to watch in 2019? This feels just a nice little space, Graham, of big international championships that you can never get away from. And then, hey, there's some of these fun kind of, I almost call them pop-up races. And I realize that they're part of an organized something or other, but I'm just saying they're kind of these nice fillers that aren't Le Mans, aren't Daytona, et cetera, et cetera.
I mean, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Do you choose for this one of the kind of the recognised talents that's just emerging? Mike Conway is basically doing stellar stuff in LMP1 now, has been one of the improving men there. Thomas Laurent, and stepping up to LMP1, being very, very quick, has made an odd error, but has been phenomenally quick in that. Or do you look back into some of the supporting categories, things like LMP3, which has been designed for a particular purpose in kind of pro-am racing, but is giving younger talent the opportunity really to shine. And amongst the guys that I think are emerging, I think we'll see a number of these guys stepping forward. You have Van Utet, watch for where he will emerge, the young Dutchman in 2019. I'm aware of, I believe, the deal that he's actually just garnered, but I'm respecting commercial confidences and waiting for that announcement, but will be in a very big seat in 2019. Young Colin Noble in the Kyrgios Nielsen squad, bringing that team into real contention in a number of races, and I'm sure we'll do the same with Asia as well. Those kind of talents are amongst the ones that have turned my head. Porsche Guy 7, for another of our WC Redditors, asked about motorsport photography, a subject about which I know zero, other than I know the right ones to employ. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, I would say, and I get this question once or twice a month at least, and I'm sure that the other photographers get it even more who do just nothing but photography. We're in a tough time for this. If we are talking about our dear Porsche Guy 7 wanting to get money and or make a real living for this. I know that you noted you're not looking to get paid or do it as a job. Keep in mind, though, that gaining access, getting credentials for an event, if we're talking a pro event, something that it is a big organized series that you're wanting to go and shoot, couple things to just consider. They are going to want and need, they being a generalism, some sort of proof or commission from a magazine, a website, something that's credible. Hopefully, if you're saying, hey, sportscarsbeawesome.biz has commissioned me to go shoot your event, they're probably going to say who and then say no. So you're going to need something that presents you as a legitimate photographer to gain credentials. Second point to consider, going beyond that, the other way to go about it is to shoot for a team or a manufacturer. And that's where not only could credentials be provided, but this is where I think you're going to have a much harder time right now, because for the most part, sports car racing, as I've seen it, is blessed with the greatest talent, wherever it is throughout the world. The folks who are shooting sports car racing, hashtag me personally, my opinion, I would say are just truly, they are the ones. There are some amazing photographers in Formula One as well, but sports cars just loaded with talent. And the other part too, which could be a little problematic, leading back to your question here, and I'm sorry I'm giving you the negatives up front, but a lot of those super talented photographers have been embedded with a manufacturer or a team for a really long time. So if I think of a Richard Prince for example. He has been Corvette Racing's photographer since the dawn of time. As long as Corvette Racing is in the sport, or as long as Richard wants to shoot the sport, I don't foresee that ever changing. You can run down a list of a lot of the amazing folks who work with DSC also have team or manufacturer affiliations and so on. What I'm getting at is, if we're looking at routes of how you want to get in and start doing motorsport photography to just build your way in, going to local events, amateur events, your club races, whatever it might be, just building up a good little portfolio. That might be too strong of a term, but just building some good work, something where you can show someone 10 to 15 really solid images of cars on track, it moving, something that doesn't paint a portrait but actually shows that you can grasp the fact that these are motor racing vehicles, make some pretty photos, artistic photos, some nice shots of folks, drivers, crew members, you name it, in the pits, some static shots that show the character and life, some maybe scene setters, something a little wider angle that, whether it's a sunlight, sundown, whatever it is, just something that can show someone that you might want to reach out to that, hey, I'm not claiming to be the best, just want to show you that I have talent for consideration. Doing that at a club event or over however many club events, definite strong suggestion there. And the next step would be reaching out to sites to see if, or magazines as you mentioned, if you wanted to get credentials for a bigger event. The only other real thing, Graham, that I'll throw in here to close is, while I mentioned that we have in sports car racing a lot of folks who own the vast majority of the real estate in terms of opportunities, right? Pretty much all the teams are taken, all the manufacturers are represented. When you look at, oh, hey, that team just jumped onto the, and I'll just say because it's coming up, the Roar Before the 24 or Rolex 24 lineup, or they're going to be there in the second tier, the Michelin Cup series. They're brand new. Those might be the ones to look at first and foremost because they might not be ably represented with photography. And knowing that some of those teams are stepping up, and I don't want to say amateur, but this is their first time in kind of the bigger leagues, having a photographer who's on a similar path as well, you often find a good little relationship that can be developed there. So those are kind of the general things I'd recommend.
And with drivers as well, think about it this way. If you're looking at the career path for a driver, particularly maybe a young professional or a non-professional driver, that journey is something that, you can be a part of, but be aspirational, but be realistic. And one thing I would say is, do not come into a professional paddock and have your USP being that you will do this for nothing, because two things will happen in that context. The first thing that will happen is people will, if you're talented, take you for granted, and you will find it very difficult to get off that path. The second thing is you will massively piss off the people who are trying to make a living doing this, and that is not a way to introduce yourself in a constructive way into that family. And it very much is a family atmosphere, and like lots of families, it row like hell. But I would absolutely encourage you, don't expect to come in at the top level, walking into the IMSA paddock, the WEC paddock, and expect there to be a living there for you. Build it. If you've got talent, it will come. For me, it is about two things. It's about the eye, and it's about the work ethic and the attitude to the task in hand. It is staggering the number of people with talent that simply cannot work to a brief. You need to be talented, and you need to understand it is phenomenally hard work with the pressures that a pro racing circuit actually brings to you, and it's phenomenally expensive as well. Good luck, but be aspirational, but be realistic.
I'll also maybe throw in this. There's also nothing wrong, dear Porsche Guy 7, with just being someone who loves doing racing photography as an amateur. And by amateur, I mean someone who is not thrust into the professional realm. You find out very quickly that as a, quote, professional photographer, it ain't about you. It's about what the team wants. You go get it, and it might bore you to death. You'll be doing all kinds of staged things where it's a job. It's not a passion. And the photographers, the pro photographers that I tend to love the most and respect the most are the ones who have retained that passion while meeting their clients' needs. But they also tend to be the ones who are the best at what they do and are therefore given more latitude. Hey, you're an artist. We're not going to tell you how to paint. We're going to give you some suggestions of a couple of portraits we might like. But for the most part, you, blank canvas, go do your thing. We know you. We trust you. You're one of the best, one of the greatest. That's rarefied air. For the 90% below them, it's truly, I need these three things by 10 a.m. because I want to put them on our social account, and I need this sent in and done by this time by 1:30 because it has to go in for a print ad. And so, again, it's a job. You are strictly meeting your quote boss's deadlines and expectations, and the amount of time you spend on track, say in the field doing what you do, versus being huddled over your laptop in the media center at 3 a.m. doing whatever adjustments and such to get the product to your client. Not always super glamorous, but I'll tell you that there are a couple of photographers in IMSA, for example. I don't want to say I've prided myself, but I'm usually one of the last people to leave on a daily basis. There are a couple of folks who are on the photo side who are regularly there many hours after I've left, and it's because they are strictly doing client work, not just looking at their amazing artistry that they have performed for the day. So there's that side too, which makes saying, hey, maybe I'll just be the person that loves doing this without that, call it pro official angle factored in.
Well, I'll tell you what, we're going to leap forward because there's an associated question, simply because it's about photography, from Craig Johnson, who asks specifically to you, MP, your favourite track to shoot at, which corner or vantage point is your favourite in the sport?
I feel like we might have answered this last week, or in the most recent show, and if we didn't, then I'm having some sort of weird flashback to things that didn't happen. Boy, let me think. I believe in what I answered before was turn one at Indianapolis.
I think you did.
But, I mean, hey, we got it, and I'm not in the mood for editing it out, so let me think of another one quickly that is just all kinds of awesome. I might have mentioned this, I don't know, earlier in the year. If we're talking true favorite, one that I just love because there's more than photography, it is the kink at Le Mans on the run down to Indianapolis. So if you're shooting it, it's often just a head-on. You can get some nice panning shots, some streaky, tree-ish explosion of speed stuff. You can also turn around and get the cars trailing away going into Indianapolis. There's a lot of fun there, but the reason that I love it, that first and foremost, Graham, is thanks to the LMP1 hybrids, the punch in the chest of air. That it is something where there aren't many times that I find where you get to shoot and beyond hearing the race cars and having that sensory input, actually have your body register the elements truly going kaboom, kaboom, through the air moving. That air rattling the barriers, maybe moving trees a little bit depending on how many cars are coming by at the same time. That's one where you're also on high alert. You're definitely on high alert of if something goes wrong, and we have seen cars fly and do other things at the kink there. Yeah, it's going
to have gone wrong, and you're going to know about it afterwards.
And okay, this is just admitting, my further another layer of my stupidity or whatever you would want to call it. I love stuff like that. Right, standing 100 feet back behind the barrier with a long lens to shoot the thing going around the place. Okay, cool. And you might be able to take a nice photo. When you are able to get to stretches like turn one at Indianapolis, where cars are coming by you at 225 miles an hour and feel that same punch, but also I am in the cage with a bear. And I hope that the bear does not swipe at me because I'm dead and there's a slim chance I'm going to survive this. I'm exaggerating a little bit with Indy because there's very big, tall fencing there. Not so at the kink at Le Mans. But I do enjoy, Graham, I must admit, and this is someone who was an amateur race car driver for a couple of years, long time ago, who loves racing, loves the thrill, loves the danger aspect of it, controlling and staying away from the going over that edge. What's the next best thing? Well, as a photographer, being able to go to a couple of corners where you're very apparent that there is a high risk you have to manage and be aware of, and also being able to feel the pressure of the cars and the force of the cars. That's pretty amazing. I'll just throw in one other thing that I remembered being a kid. When I was able to, as a mechanic, those of you might know that I used to drag around my camera with me all the time as a mechanic, engineer, crew member, whatever. And when I could, I'd sneak away for a couple of minutes to shoot whatever session was on track with one of the other series at Sears Point, a.k.a. Sonoma Raceway. Back when using the full turn 11 was just, there was only that. There was no other course options. The IndyCar, for example, used the short turn 11. But cars would go all the way down into turn 11. It's effectively a U-turn and head shoot out of that down the straight towards turn 1. I used to love, with the SCCA Trans Am series, late 80s, early 90s, because no one was smart enough to say, hey, that guy maybe shouldn't be there. I would go and perch myself on the wall at the exact place where the Trans Am cars would apex. And because they had 700 plus horsepower, big old V8s, they'd come out of this slow U-turn crossed up more often than not. And being a young daredevil in my mind, at least, I would squat down in the barrier, the wall maybe, Graham, came up to mid-thigh at most. It wasn't super tall. I would squat down and just be there with my camera as I'm seeing this God-forsaken Goodyear tire in all kinds of spinning and sliding coming straight at me and snap away. And it was just a true rush of like, wow, this vehicle, it's amazing. It is truly unchained and untamed, crossed up coming out of the corner, and car after car would be doing that. And just sitting there having this thing come at me, it was a test of like, okay, are you leaning your head back a little bit? Are you going to jump back and run from this one? Is he going to smack the wall exactly where you're standing? That was a little bit of fun too. Probably dumb as well.
Well, oddly enough, that neatly kind of segues into the next question. At least potentially does, because 4S GTE, one of our long-time listeners and questioners from the WEC Reddit group, asks about the WEC and IMSA medical safety and marshalling personnel. Do they rely more on local crews and volunteers for each track or region? Do a permanently employed team travels with the championship, like the IndyCar safety team? Brings into another question. Sebring doubleheader. Will WEC and IMSA use race control process procedures they usually do? Will there be a compromise of some sort? More specifically, will the WEC use its full safety procedures like the full course yellow and slow zones? Will they adopt some of IMSA's procedures? What was it like in 2012? I'll crack on with that one from a WEC point of view. It's an FI World Championship. For this, for the WEC races, Eduardo Freitas is an FIA a race director. It will be the FIA process for that race. Remember, back in 2012, it wasn't two separate races; it was one race, but it will be the full FIA suite of processes. I am absolutely sure, including, I'm sure, the Porsche safety cars that will travel with the package. So that's what it will be like in terms of whether or not they use a traveling safety team. There are traveling staff that travel with the FIWC. It is not the full safety team. They will use the track-based corner workers at Sebring, but there will be some oversight from race control and some of the safety and technical delegates that travel with the WEC worldwide. That's the way it works with that. I know we have in recent years, MP, had some controversy about the IMSA safety team were disbanded, were they not?
Yes, unfortunately, that was something lost along with the LMP1 class when the American Le Mans Series and Grand Am merged into modern-day IMSA. The IMSA safety team, the ALMS safety team was a creation of current IMSA president Scott Atherton, and truly one of his things that he took great pride in. And I know that it's an ongoing sore spot that had to, I shouldn't say had to, was chosen for removal due to costs, I believe. Also, it has never been NASCAR's policy, knowing that IMSA is owned by NASCAR. It's never been NASCAR's policy, to my knowledge, unless we're talking way back in the day, to actually have their own dedicated safety team. They rely upon the local tracks, ambulances, and whatnot to fill in a lot of the safety intervention needs. Not saying that they don't have medical folks on staff within the organizations. I'm just saying the car just crashed. Who is going to it? What is happening? Who are the experts in and around it? The American Le Mans Series used to have a total package, a complete traveling crew that handled that. They knew all the drivers knew them. Great relationship. There's obviously IMSA's, call it, an intervention vehicle, one that drives out with some of its officials to look and see. But in terms of who are the folks jumping out, the EMTs, the medical experts, and all of that, that tends to be filled in on a local basis from race to race rather than having a traveling dedicated crew. I know that there has been an ongoing desire on the IMSA front, especially by Mr. Atherton, to create a new traveling team. I have not heard anything to suggest that is going to happen and or happen soon. On the IndyCar front, they do have their own. What is the AMR safety team, formerly known as the Holmatro safety team. And what it comes down to, Graham, and I know this is maybe it's an obvious thing, maybe it isn't, but it's not a matter of having 10 to 15 people on full-time staff and having to pay those salaries throughout the year. The vast majority, if we're talking IndyCar and their AMR safety team, have normal jobs and come to the IndyCar events on the weekends or, block time out and do that as a secondary thing. There are a couple of permanent employees, but what we're really talking about expense-wise, mate, is a whole separate transporter filled with those intervention vehicles and the trucks and the cleanup, this and that. If you think of what it costs to either buy or lease a tractor trailer and use that for a year, purchase all of the vehicles. They're specialized, right? They're customized, whether it's with light bars at the top, tow equipment, crane type stuff, maybe, blowing equipment to clear the track. It's not an inexpensive thing for sure. But then you also start thinking about, okay, maybe we are not paying these folks on a full-time basis. They're not full-time employees, but again, pick the number 10 to 15 people. That's 10 to 15 flights, X amount of nights in a hotel room and rental cars, times, pick the number of events, 10, 15, 20. It's not an insignificant cost. I would also say that that's the reason why, if we're just using IndyCar as the example, it has not been called the IndyCar safety team. It's been called the sponsored by safety team because IndyCar has gone out and sought some sort of medical, some sort of safety, some sort of something type company that would say, oh, yes, absolutely, that makes sense to us. We are going to help sponsor this and subsidize this and promote this as an extension of what we do with our core businesses. So I can't answer. The one thing I cannot add to this because I have no knowledge of is whether IMSA has attempted to do this to find commercial partners that could offset those costs, or B, Graham, if NASCAR's overarching policy of we do not do this ourselves. We rely on the local tracks and such to fill this in, if that's the thing keeping such explorations from even taking place.
Yeah, it's, safety's safety. And for me, I like the travelling team model, but you're right, it comes with a meaty bill. There are, though, the other aspects of this, which is a local team is more aware of what is available at short notice and where. Maybe a melding of the two is where we're looking for the big continental and global series. But we'll wait and see.
We also just had the revealing of one of your other stripper names, hashtag Meaty Bill. I love it. You are just all kinds of straightforward with us. Shall we delve into our final theme of topics, my friend?
Yeah.
All right.
Let's have a crack at that. We're going to go from the top to the bottom. We're just going to dip in here. Steve Smith Jr. Hello, Steve, and a happy Christmas to you and yours. One of our Facebook, one of our regular questioners. Easy one, he says this week. It's easy for you to say. What were your favourite moments of 2018? Mine was getting to go to Watkins Glen and totally by chance meeting up with, me, and twice he did.
He did say, hopefully, he said favourite?
He says the man's deranged.
Right.
Hopefully we'll get to meet up with you, Marshall, in 2019. I'll kick up with this. For me, of course, I love the racing, and of course, I love all of that. But for me, it's the social aspect of it. And we've not done enough road trips at DSC in recent years, and we got a couple of those this year. And we did 2 back-to-back. Went to Paul Ricard, the south of France from the UK, and the following weekend down to Monza. 2 very long road trips indeed, with the DSC Fun Bus, Stephen Kilby, with Dave Lord, and with young Ryan Kish, who was joining us for a couple of back-to-back weekends, and they were great fun. We did all sorts of stuff that we'd not done before. Went over an Alp, under an Alp, on one of the trains that does that journey when the open passes, the Alpine passes are closed. You can go to beneath the mountain on the mountain railways on effectively open trucks. So literally you could, if you were silly enough, open the car window and brush your hand against the tunnel wall. We had great fun with that. And yes, actually Watkins Glen was a highlight for me too. Never been before. Now hungry to go again, and actually would love to take the missus with me, because it's a heck of a road trip from New York City as well, through some lovely parts of your great nation. And more power to it, MP. What about yourself?
I feel a little bit bad because it might come across as a promotion for the Marshall Pruitt podcast. It's not meant to be, though. I have to admit, the thing that I believe I enjoyed the most from this season was the creation of the live podcasts that we did. I think 5 or so of them, and we'll be doing plenty more in 2019. That was something that it was an experiment. I don't know. I mean, I've never hosted a live event like that just out in, well, actually I take that back, I have. But I've never done something like this that was my own. I've hosted other things for other people, enjoy that, but never had the thing where it was me and my thing. And man, that was a blast, Graham. Just fun, first of all. Just truly just fun. Bringing good folks together on the IndyCar side for those events, on the IMSA side as well. And just creating a fun mix of conversations and personalities and such. If we think back to the Road America IMSA event where we had IMSA President Scott Atherton, Corvette Racing crew chief Dan Binks, 3-time Indy 500 winner plus new Acura DPI driver Elio Castro Neves, and 2-time IMSA champ Christina Nielsen. You could not ask for 4 people that are less alike, and yet had a whole bunch of fun among themselves, and also answering questions from the crowd. That's the thing that we do there, just like we do here. It's all listener driven, in that case, participant driven. It was just fun, man, being able to get out and be among fellow lovers of the sport. So for me personally, I love that and can't wait to do more.
Isn't that it? Isn't that it, though? Isn't it that shared passion? Isn't that why this format works? Isn't it why we just seem to have hit something nice here that plays to, I think, your motivation and my motivation here, which is people are asking the questions that perhaps we've asked ourselves. And I'll never cease to be amazed by, the minutiae that fascinate people here. And actually, when you think it through, it just to tap into the kind of passion that I feel for the sport, even 20, 30 years in to, being a fan and being kind of part of the professional, caravan that follows this thing around the world. Fantastic stuff.
I also love the thrill of being out walking in an audience and having someone raise their hand to ask a question. I love the thrill/fear of, oh my goodness.
What are they going to say now?
Yeah, and so I've gotten better at spotting the drunk folks. Those have been some good ones, too. Not particularly intelligible questions, but we've gotten interesting answers. But that's also the fun, too. There's a little bit of a thrill ride in that as well. Like, okay, I hope you're not about to kill me here. And, some sort of viral moment of, racist attack during live podcast at motor racing event, Pruitt at fault. So anyways, all that aside, it's been a blast and looking forward to doing more.
Right, next one is from a she's a dam. She's a dam?
She a Adam.
Oh, right.
She's an Adam. There we go.
She's an Adam. She's apparently from Facebook. Never heard of her. I guess it's a her. Merry Christmas, you two. Special present time. Secret is out. She's a witch, so okay, definitely a girl then. And I've just brewed
maybe even a woman.
Indeed. A batch of polyjuice potion, allowing you to become anyone for an hour. Which driver would you like to be for one race stint? I was about to say something completely uncalled for there, but I won't. Which driver would you like to be for just one race stint, only to drive their race car? I'll lend you my time turner as well, so you may pick someone from any era. I'll go for a really quick one. It's a McLaren F1 at Le Mans. And it's
Goodwin.
I know, I just love it. I love it.
However, we get any form of question that involves you and driving, it's a damn McLaren F1 in 1995.
Well, it's that, or it's something with unseemly amounts of downforce, because I'd love to experience that thing, just once in my life. If there was a reset button, no consequence, I'd just love to feel the way that feels, because that's not something I've ever really done. But that's the one. That, or to, and I've said this one before now, Group B rally car next to someone proper down a proper forest stage, because that's the other thing in my life I feel is missing. I'd love to experience that.
My dear pal Harley Cluxton told me about, I believe it was his first drive at the 24 Hours of Le Mans with the NART, the North American, or the Ferrari NART North American Racing Team, Luigi Canetti, and driving, I think it was 512, possibly.
Maybe 512,
I think so. And again, I apologize, maybe it was a 312, but was speaking about going down the unmolested Mulsanne Straight, no chicanes. Obviously, this would have been back in 1970 or whatever it was. But I remember Harley telling me about being in his Ferrari, driving just pouring rain, bucketing down rain, and his friend and driver coach and mentor, Pedro Rodriguez, blasting by in his factory Golf Porsche 917 at 1,000 miles an hour faster than Harley was going, and just talking about how that experience was magical and also seemingly the end of his mortality. So just because it came to mind, I would say Mrs. She-A Adam. I would say being Pedro Rodriguez in the rain at Le Mans with a super extra amazing straight line run, water beneath these non-slick tires, right? These are still grooved, roadish type, at least tread concept tires. Some downforce, but not so much. Some lift as well. The thought of just winding that flat 12 and blasting down at 230, 40, whatever the crazy number would have been, in the driving rain, trying to keep this vehicle that, as you mentioned, downforce, really the elements are not necessarily helping to keep this car in place, and having to, I'm sure, apply opposite lock in a straight line many times. It sounds like something that, pick any drifting video you've seen, any gymkhana thing you've seen, anything where you go, oh my goodness, that's crazy and dangerous, and I would never do that. And this just takes me back to something where you say, forget all of that. This isn't a car made out of aluminum foil and sticks, seemingly. I mean, if you've ever seen a Porsche 917 frame, I mean, you feel like you could probably crush it like a beer can, okay? It was super lightweight. Accidents were not something you wanted to have because your life would end. They'd be picking you out of that frame. This is just, again, something where, all kidding aside, Shay, when I think about what could I do if I could go back and do something? Of course, there's the Indy 500 in this amazing vehicle, and Bathurst in this, and Spa, and I mean, again, there's all kinds of things I can think of. I don't know if any one of them would be more visceral, more frightening, and make me feel more alive, and then hopefully still alive by the time I got to the end of the Mulsanne. Than this scenario painted by my friend Harley, and having the late, great Pedro Rodriguez show him that no, whatever you think bravery is, watch my bravery go sailing by. Just, unfathomable to me.
Let's move on. Ben Tyler, another Facebook questioner. Some of the best tracks in the world are, what he says, are club tracks, not able to handle larger pro events due to lacking facilities or safety or something else. Without ruining the character of the track, what club track would you most want to be made into a pro track? Ben says that his would be the street circuit at Hutchison Island in Savannah. Yes, he knows it was originally built for Indy cars, but it's nowhere near that caliber now. I'll have a first crack at this one. I actually don't want to change club tracks. I think they're just something special in their own right. There is one. It's one where I grew into this craziness that is a profession in sports car racing by covering the British GT Championship. And we used to go to Castlecombe, which is down in the south of England, southwest of England. Fantastic little track. The cars have outgrown that. There are noise restrictions there. There's some very funny stories indeed about the noise restrictions there. But that is my favourite of the club circuits that we go to. There are a few others that are a bit Marmite. Some people love them, some people hate them. But Castlecombe in the UK, have a look on the web for some video footage there, because we've had some pretty quick cars doing the rounds of Castlecombe. I wish we were still going there with the current range of GT3 cars, but I understand entirely that they are just too quick to do it nowadays.
I'm going to go to... Let's go to Ryan Casillas from Facebook, who says, with Christmas right around the corner, what are your favorite racing-related Christmas stories? Or would it be Christmas-related stories?
Well, I've got one. It's a little bit cheeky. Look, Daily Sports Car and its predecessor sites have been around now since the mid-90s, very early days in internet reporting terms, thanks to my predecessor as the editor, Malcolm Cracknell. Merry Christmas, Malcolm, because I know he listens. And they come and they go, do the competitor sites. And there was one in particular run by, it has to be said, not a very nice person, based around the Sebring track. And his particular bent was to use the fabulous Google Translate to have effectively a press release-o-matic effort in trying to get to news before we did, blah, blah, blah. That doesn't interest me at all. But the reason it's a Christmas story is because there was, back in the day before we had the insistence that you must enter a full season of anything, there was a regular guy that used to turn up for a couple of early races in the year, apply for the Le Mans 24 Hours, and then not be seen again for the remainder of the season. And his name was Noel Del Bello. And I think Noel was, I think, some kind of commercial florist, and very often his cars would feature that kind of. But yes, indeed, in the translation, because it was a good Google translation of the latest effort, his name did come across as, and I quote, Christmas del Bello. And repeatedly so. There is one other one. You might remember this one, MP. This was back in the Porsche 917 days. And I think this is Willikhausen back in the day, where the German chancellor of the day, it was some kind of end-of-season deal at the and I mean the proper Nürburgring, wanted to see the 917, and the motorcade, as it was at the time, came onto the track. I'm pretty certain they took the 917 Can-Am car round the Nordschleife in the snow, followed by the motorcade. I'm pretty certain that was a thing back there. But that's I don't think there's film of it, but there are pictures of it. It's not Christmas, but sure was Christmassy in the way in which that presented itself. They're the two I've got.
So this one, Ryan, it isn't maybe fun. I'm sorry, it isn't maybe like heartwarming. It's kind of the opposite, cartoon anvil, but it just struck me as funny. So this time of year, as you may know, folks like myself, 1 Graham Goodwin, and others will be invited into embargoed engagements with manufacturers or teams. We've got a new program coming out next year. We've got a new car we're releasing, something top secret that we're doing. That kind of November to mid-December time, you can often get invitations to certain tracks under full non-disclosure agreements to be there, to capture it, interview the drivers, do photos, videos, whatever it is. And one that just, again, struck me as kind of a Christmas-timey thing. Don't remember if it was late November, early December, but it was 2013, I believe, Graham. And having just had a very busy season covering, I believe, every IndyCar round, so that would have been 15, 16 races, plus Le Mans, plus, however many ALMS/Grand Am races. I was full. I was good. Traveling, I did really need it. Then we got a great invite, embargoed invite from our friends at Mazda, who had the new Lola/Multimatic diesels that they're going to be rolling out in IMSA for 2014. Great. All right. And we're going to do our first track test at Sebring. Well, Sebring is about as far away in the United States from me as you can get. So, okay, well, I'm not really wanting to get on a plane again to go as far as I can, but all right, let's do this. Hop on a plane, California to Florida. However the timing worked out, Graham, I think it was it was a later flight from the Orlando airport, depending on how long it takes to get your bags and blah, blah, blah. From the time the plane touches down, it can be 2 hours, 2.5 hours before you get to Sebring, whatever it was. I think I got to the Chateau Law Hotel at Sebring at 1 a.m., 2 a.m., something like that. And we were meant to film this. I was meant to film this. And so, well, you want to get up. You want to get the shot of the car being rolled out of the transporter and coming down the lift and all those things, just to do a video that paints a portrait of the day. And we'll get all this stuff ready for releasing it under embargo, whatever future date, so on and so forth. So I think I was up at 5, long day of travel, about 3 hours sleep. Fortunately we're inside the track, but get there, get set up, get all the shots and the photos and the videos and so you name it. And finally the sun is rising. It's whatever time in the morning, about 8 a.m. I'm guessing, 8:30, where things are warm enough to go. And I forget who it is. I think they might have put Jonathan Bomarito in the car. Might have been Tristan Nunez, I don't remember, but strapped him in, getting ready to pull away to do, just pull out and do an installation lap. Clunk, clunk, clunk. All the torque from the diesel snapped all kinds of things within the transmission while it was attempting to pull away from pit lane to do its very first lap.
Oh no.
So here I am. And again, this is white people problems, first world problems deluxe. So trust me, this is not like a woe is me thing. It's just one of those, things of irony where you're like, come on, man. I already didn't want to do this cross-country trip and blah, blah, blah at this time of the year, but okay, it's cool, and you get here, and you're running on fumes, and you're tired, and you're up early, and blah, blah, blah. When the damn thing breaks 10 feet into its first lap, and there were no spares.
Oh, dear.
There were no spares. So this whole entire effort by Mazda, right? Spend all this money, get the cars ready, ship them down here, the full team, whatever. Their whole thing was done within 10 feet. Pack up the cars and head home. And I mean, I'm literally just sitting there thinking, what in the world did I just do? So we tried to come up with well, maybe we can put the car up on stands and I can get some generic B-roll and we can do a little interview here or there. Try and mask the fact that I only have 10-second, let's say 9 seconds of footage of the car attempting to pull away and trimming the 10th second off. But yeah, it was one of those things where I got in, again, landed at 9 or 10 at night, and I think I was back out on a flight at like 3 maybe or something like that. It was just one of those crazy kind of Christmas time, all right, this is going to be cool, and I can't wait for folks to see this kind of awesome little, embargoed work that we're going to just going to kind of, hey, well, I flew to Florida and back and saw a car go 10 feet. The end. I could do nothing but just laugh and realize that, hey, man, sometimes that's the way things go, and you have to accept that. So, yeah, if anything, Ryan, it just made me happy to be home for the holidays.
I'm giggling about it even now. Dear me, we've all been there. We've all seen these kind of things, emerge before our very eyes with the horror that only that investment in time can actually bring with it, haven't we? Rod Johnson says, first Sebring attendance next year, and he gets the WC bonus. He's doing Club Sebring and tent camping. What's the one thing he must do? Merry Christmas, guys, he says. Stay sober. No, don't do that. No.
No, absolutely do not do that. Well, if you want to have a true and proper Green Park infield camping experience, definitely get the camp set up, get the tent going and all of that, but you must be prepared with whatever vehicle you are driving in to adorn it with all kinds of insanity. So whether it is stickers, whether it is temporary, grease paint or something, blow-up dolls. If it's a truck, put a couch in the back. It needs sirens. It needs something. If you do not prepare your vehicle to be one of the dozens, maybe 100 at least vehicles that are treated like moving flotillas, like you are effectively driving in a sports car parade, but kind of Mardi Gras, drunk, belligerent, crazy, and offensive themed, then you're really not getting the proper Sebring experience. So yes, just prepare to transform your vehicle into something that you would be that you'd be aghast if anyone in your normal life saw being driven on the street. But there's just lots of folks who circle the paddock at about 2 miles an hour, just honking horns, cranking music, drinking beer, offering beer, throwing beads, you name it. That's part of the fun too.
Well, I mean, oddly enough, you just mentioned exactly the point I was going to make. Rod, imagine this. Look out your front door now. Think about the kind of sight that you would see would have you calling 911. That's about normal at Sebring. And if you turn it up a little bit, that actually might get beyond that and call the SWAT team or even the National Guard. That's not actually unusual either. I mean, I've seen some completely extraordinary stuff there. But, yeah, prepare to have your measurement of normality readjusted just for a couple of nights.
There's also, and I'm not saying you should do this, I'm just trying to give some limits. There's usually 1 or 2 vehicles that go by where I see them and think, I am so glad my wife is not here. And not because just she would be offended by it, but because she would look at me and say, jackass, you are never doing this again. I thought this was a professional thing that you did for a living. this is what you're called? This is the environment where you work? Hell no. So, yeah, there's a couple of those where you go, okay, so you decided to stop by the sex toy store on the way to Sebring, and then, okay, and those are on your view. Okay, so, yeah. All kinds. There are all kinds of people.
Takes all kinds.
Yeah, one of the many reasons we love Sebring, because there is truly nothing like it in any other form of motor racing in the United States. For this alone, for the fans, in Green Park, in just the pure celebration. The Indianapolis 500 once had its snake pit, which, I think a lot of the Center for Disease Control, a lot of research was done there back in the day to try and find the origins of a lot of things. But, yeah, it's by no means, it's a defanged snake pit these days. It's truly Sebring, 12 hours / 1,000 kilometers now at the WEC, or 1,500 miles, or whatever the hell they decide they're going to do. And just outrageous fans that make the event what it is.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Baxter, another of our regulars, MP, as we close in on the end of this second show this week.
A constant voice of reason, Mr. Andrew.
Absolutely.
Baxter, by the way.
It says, you're given access to a time machine. Now, he's blown it already.
You and Shay need to coordinate, by the way, on the time machine stuff. Because she's got potion. Well,
they could be an item, you know. They could. You're given access to a time machine, he says, moving on quickly, to change one decision in the history of sports car racing. It could be a rules decision, 3.5-litre Group C engine rules, a steward's decision, penalty for blocking Peugeot at Le Mans, or a team decision, convince Nissan not to use Toro track. Any one decision can be changed, and why do you make that change? That's a cracking question, isn't it?
Well, I think we know where one scale X-Trix, and I just cannot pronounce that properly, so I'll just own that. One scale X-Trix heading based on questions, our favorite questions. You got me with the one I was going to choose, because I love the 3.5-liter Group C rules. I know that they were not sustainable and that there were all kinds of shortcomings. You know, hey, we've got this 3.5-liter purebred motor. Jaguar comes to mind, but we're going to go to the V12 for Le Mans because we don't think the Cosworth F1 engine will last. I mean, again, there are many things that did not work out properly for that era in terms of sustainability, but it was one of the greatest short burst eras ever in sports car racing. I would absolutely say, if there's one point of sorrow, true sorrow, it's that Ben Bowlby and the good folks, there were good intentions with the Nissan program for sure. Between Ben and Darren Cox and the decision makers who said, yes, let's go with an unproven hybrid system that they're telling us they could do a double hybrid that could produce as many as 1,500 horsepower. The Nissan GTR LM1 Nismo GT Nismo M RL1 M Nismo GTR should have been awesome. It was so far crazy and advanced in its primary concept that doubling that up by going with a crazy, unproven hybrid system as well, it's just something, and I hate to play 2020 hindsight here, but had I been involved in that program as any kind of decision maker, I would have stopped that conversation the moment that it started. Or I would have said, before we agree to anything, Toro Track needs to spend their money and prove to us that not only it will work, but it will work consistently. And once they come back to us with their 30-hour tests and proof of concept that this will work and deliver as necessary, then we will consider going down that route. But they are going to be our number 2 or our number 3. And we are instead going to name some of the other vendors for a hybrid system first, because they are in vehicles, competing in the series, and proven. So when you have a vehicle like Ben's that was amazing, and really did do the things that he said it would, and had this amazingly small aero footprint thanks to the through-flow aero system and the big up tires up front, front-wheel drive, and the rear-wheel skinny tires meant to be hybrid propelled. And I mean, it was a wild vehicle that could have and should have been groundbreaking in more than just concept, but actual delivery. And the choice to go with an unproven mechanical hybrid system as well. It was stupid from the beginning, and this is a management failure. This is not a technical failure. This was a pure failure of management and leadership to say, no, if we're going forward with this program, even though, as we know, Graham, the Nissan was definitely a much lower budget effort than any of the other LMP1 hybrids. If we're going this far, we have to take some things seriously. The car itself, crazy, folks are going to love it. But man, we cannot go completely insane. That's what they did. And I enjoyed Darren Cox as a person. He failed so massively on this project, and failed so massively to say no on this that, it's a stain. I feel so bad because that car should be something we're celebrating today. Instead, kind of a laughingstock.
And it's a shame, because what we're now seeing right now is that there were some aspects of the management of Nissan's motorsport output where, frankly, Darren made the difference, a big difference. GT Academy with the excellent GT3 projects, and that's all now being reeled back. But I think you're right. Ultimately, it was a step too far. They needed to do something wacky, but there's wacky and unsustainable, and I think that's what we got to with that program. For me, it's a more recent one, and that is, damn the fact that twin turbo V8s are fuel efficient and wonderful in terms of getting the best torque and power out of GT cars, because for me it's ruining part of the sport that I most love, and that's the soundtrack that we get for our GT cars. It's the twin turbo V8. If I could uninvent it, I would. That's it. That simple.
Yeah, the sound. Yeah, again, all the things you just mentioned, meritorious for sure. In a racing environment, though, somewhat silent, weird-sounding Ferraris and BMWs and whatever does not exactly set one's imagination alight, at least. So, it be.
We are closing in. Let's go with Tim saying. Merry Festivus, he says. Project Cars 2 did an add-on pack this year, featured the Le Mans track for the 1970s alongside two varieties of Porsche 917 and Ferrari 512. Which two era-appropriate sports cars and corresponding circuit would you like to see featured in a video game?
I won't stick to the two sports car dynamic. I will actually expand that out to about 4, and this is all because of a conversation I had this week while interviewing the amazing and awesome Steve Millen, a multiple-time IMSA GTO champion with Nissan, and he was, granted, I was there and watched him win those championships and so on, but he's regaling me in his appreciation for the late 80s, early 90s IMSA GTO category, where you did have massive monster V6 turbo Nissan 300 ZX. Look at that, I use Z. You could have a 4-rotor Mazda RX-7. You could have, or you did have, the Jack Roush Ford, could be a Lincoln Mercury Cougar or something with either a 4-cylinder turbo. Sometimes they'd stuff a big old V8 in it. You would have the inline turbocharged 5-cylinder Audi and whatnot. And those 4-ish cars, and maybe there might have been a few others that got stuck in there, but for the most part you had massively different ideas. Big V6 turbo, 4-rotor, smaller 4-cylinder turbo, occasionally bigger V8 non-turbo, Audi 5-cylinder turbo, and these cars could and or would fight very, very close. And this was before BOP. This was something where the formula just worked, where they traded wins. There was success achieved by all the aforementioned manufacturers. And I would say that if I'm looking at an era to consider where we could have some sort of cool pack, I would say those cars. As for the track, let's go for Road America. Absolutely Road America, where, again, some of those cars have would have top speed advantages, others would have cornering advantages, and they definitely would shake out and have a pretty amazing thing. But yeah, I think just in general, Tim, the lore of IMSA, knowing that the 50th anniversary is coming up here, you're going to hear lots about the 70s and some of the olden time cool stuff. You're going to hear a lot about BMW versus Porsche and such, CSLs versus 934s or whatever. We're going to hear probably a vast majority about the GTP era. The GTO, though, I think is truly slept upon, just as one of the, if you go back and just do some digging, IMSA's GTO product, late 80s, early 90s, wow, that was amazing. So that'd be my pick.
I'll go a little bit off the wall now. I believe both the tracks I'm going to mention are actually available in a variety of kind of computer games, simulations. But one I think hasn't been done for a little wee while. The other one is very recent. The first is the Pikes Peak Hill Climb. And I'm not sure that's been done particularly well in recent years. I'd like to see that with a whole variety of the amazing equipment we've done. I'd like to see it done both in the unsealed and the sealed eras as well. In other words, before the thing was tarmacked and after. The other one is the Isle of Man TT course, which has to be the most spectacularly insane, dangerous racetrack still in use anywhere on the planet. And yes, I am looking at you, the Nürburgring. It's still more dangerous than that. And I think I'd quite like to have a bit of a crack at a few of the kind of more recent bikes on that rather than sports cars. I've seen some recent footage of some fantastic stuff on YouTube of people's first exposure to the TT course on video as these bikes come by at insane speeds, and it's worth looking at. Fabulous stuff. I know Alan McNish. I had a conversation with Alan a little wee while back, and Alan only lost his dad relatively recently, but he did manage to tick a kind of a bucket list item by taking his dad across to watch the TT, and I know it's an eye-opener for him. If it turned McNish's head, then that's something spectacular right there, and that's worthy of a proper simulation.
All right, let's go. We're down to the last, 5? Okay.
5.
And you're starting to sound like aliens have invaded again, so why don't you disconnect and reconnect? And I'm not going to edit it out. Why?
They do it now.
Saturday. Just do it now. Or you can keep sounding more alien. Okay, we got ambient.
Let's try now.
Oh, and you're back.
You go.
You were being hacked. Someone was hacking you just like Paul Tracy.
It's it's my aging MacBook. That's what it is, dear me. Iced coffee is from the USCR group on Reddit. Congratulations, MP.
Can we ask them, by the way? Can they update that? The USCR. I mean, we're like year 5, year 6 now of IMSA. We could kind of.
They could. I'm surprised they haven't had the note or the black helicopter or both. Congratulations, you, Marshall Pruitt, are now the Emperor of Sports Car Insurance Racing.
Oh man, I got enough responsibilities.
I know.
Okay, I'll do it.
You control a 4-class racing series. You must choose 10 circuits from any era to make up the schedule in the sports car classes from any year to compete in it. He'd choose the 2008 LMP1 LMP2 class, the 2010 GT2 class, the 1998 GT1 class. That's a very complicated question, and we haven't got time to do all of it. But I will say this. I would choose and expand the probably year 2, 3, 4 of the LMP1 hybrid class. We can look back now and we can say, oh, it went horribly wrong, didn't it? Blah, blah. They were awesome. They were just awesome. Off the clock, amazing, awesome. And absolutely, I would now have the current LMP2 class, although I think there was better variety in earlier years. There's a part with OMP, those battles, factory cars with the Panos roasters, that was corking stuff. Absolutely amazing stuff back in the the ALMS days, wasn't it?
It was, and as you're mentioning that, I actually had a two-car appropriate answer for Tim Same, and that would be the mid-2000s Aston Martin versus Corvette GT.
Oh, yeah.
That, I think, could just now, and I know that I'm American, I'd be in the Aston Martin every time just as I get to listen to the V12 while I drive it around racing circuits. I'm not sure what I'd pick for a circuit, Tim, but when you were talking about things that we could have back or otherwise, yeah, that would be it. That would be mine. Wow. Okay. Well, you kind of chose the class stuff. I don't know if 10 is a stretch. Monsieur Iced Coffee, you vastly overestimate our ability to think. Let's see. Let me think of 5 tracks and I'll just choose ones that I've been to instead of fantasy stuff. Bathurst, period.
Yep.
Again, I think anybody that's been there has just fallen in love with it. That one for sure. I will say Long Beach. The street course, but it's also a party, and it's really challenging, and there are very hard walls to hit, and there's a lot of extra risk because you're often with slower cars, and some maybe not, depending on what year it is. They might have a class with IMSA or ALMS or Grand Am or whatever in the past where not all professionals were on track. And so, yeah, the person diving down or not getting out of the way can create a lot of drama. So I throw Long Beach in. It's just an amazing event.
I'm going to throw in Brands Hatch because I just love the place for so many reasons. Produces great racing. We don't get a lot of contemporary sports car racing action there anymore, but as a place to go and watch, as an event, as a place that produces great racing, Brands Hatch.
I will throw in Mo Sport, a.k.a. CTMP. Another just amazing track from a driving standpoint, viewing standpoint, and it's been a little while since we've mentioned this, but we do value it. There's a possibility of bear attacks. It is a Canadian track, so there, that's also just something kind of fun. Hey, there were 20,000 attendants at this year's event. 19,943 made it home. Well, all right. Look, at least 50 of us maybe made a meal for and helped feed the local bear population. So that's another consideration.
Well, another track that's Laguna Seca. There, I'm afraid you may be accosted by hippies. They might actually be, waving flowers. All of that still goes on there, but the reality is that it's still an awesome racetrack.
And let me think of one other that I've been to that is better than bad. That would just be fun, and I think folks would enjoy. We've obviously mentioned Road America multiple times.
While you ever think about that, I'm going to throw in the last one from me, and that is the Red Bull Ring. We're not going to be going back there this year for the European Le Mans Series, but for 3 reasons I'll give you. The surrounding area is just sublime, beautiful alpine scenery. The racing is good. It's a great racetrack, and the view you get from the press room there is like very little else in motorsport. Absolutely fantastic.
I'll throw this one in, which was very fortunate to receive one, Graham Goodwin, for his very first time. Watkins Glen International. Especially post its recent repave. Oh my goodness. That place is fast.
It's proper quick.
Very fast. And the fact that it is a rolling speed circuit, meaning there are a couple places where the cars slow down a bit, but there aren't many. I mean, there's not a lot of huge braking down to, second gear corners. I can't think of very many. It's kind of third gear and up, just ballsy. Yeah. So I would say from a fan standpoint, you can see just about every inch of the place. And if you love the true holy cow aspect of it, not just the racing car passing and braking and whatever, just vehicle performance and great drivers truly testing the limits of physics. Yeah, wow, Watkins Glen is amazing. Plus, beautiful is super, super beautiful.
I'm going to give you two that I regard as being relatively unspoilt. We're not going to go down the Nürburgring route, but
Never
one,
heard of it.
Absolutely, very much still part of the contemporary top-line global racing scene. Monza, fabulous, fabulous place with amazing history and still super quick. And I've been reading just this last week that they may actually be looking to take one of the chicanes out there, which could be very interesting indeed. The other one, because it's almost completely unspoilt, and that's Goodwood. The atmosphere there, amazing. It is a completely unspoiled example of the kind of post-war airfield type racetrack. But I've been round there at speed in both modern machinery and in the 1964 Roy Salvadori AC Cobra. Thanks very much, Oliver Bryant, for that hair-raising ride. But that place is unbelievably quick in whatever you choose to take around it. But that I think neatly rounds it up.
I think so.
Jeremy Charette, I think we know Jeremy's a fan not just of the Weekend Sports Cars podcast, but also of somebody else. And I think it shows here, Jeremy. For Christmas, Santa has granted you a wish. The terms, however, are very limited. If you could make Shea Adam review any car from any era, what would it be?
Ooh, all right. Well, again, I apologize. We're going to refer back to Marshall Pruitt's lifelong love for V12-powered motor racing vehicles. It would be a Group 44 Jaguar XJR5, I believe, driven by her father, the incredibly awesome Bill Adams.
Who comes up later in the show, by the way, Bill.
Yes, so I would love to see Shea, even though she's not a race car driver, but I would love to see Shea get a chance to strap in to one of the GTP cars that her father drove. And Bill was the first pro. I mean, he was embedded in that the formation of the Group 44 Jaguar GTP effort from day one. But just being able to climb in and do a few laps, I don't care if they're at a 1/10 of the speed of its capability, but just to get a chance to drive one of the big cars that her father drove, and he also drove many other things down to tin tops and otherwise. But rather than climb into something that's maybe closer to something she might drive on the street, I just love for Shea, who's we have fun with her on the show, but she's just truly an awesome human being, and also someone with a big heart, big appreciation and passion for sports car racing and the sport in general. I'd love to see just for her, even though she is not followed in her father's footsteps as a race car driver, to just get a chance to climb into one of the most extreme vehicles that he raced. And I know that, again, he was in, Audi LMP1 R8s and such, but that Jaguar was really something where he was, maybe more than almost any other major racing program, an instrumental aspect of its development and shaping into, one of the big prides of IMSA in the 1980s. So if she could just strap in and have 5 or 10 laps at whatever speed she wanted, but at least someplace with a good straight where she could row through the gears, hear that motor scream, feel 600 to 700 horsepower, push her into the back of the seat, maybe feel a little bit of the downforce turning in or braking. That I'd love to see that for her, and heck, I'd love to just I'll raise my hand and say, and I know one or two people that have either XJR 5s or 7s. I'll gladly show up and film it or do whatever, just so that she has a little keepsake. Because of the many things I wish I could do of some of the cars that my father raced, I wish I could find them and buy them or get some laps in them. Just hey. That link between father and son, father and daughter, mother and son, whatever it might be, that link in motor racing. We celebrate so many times between racing fathers and their children, but this would be pretty cool too, just making that media link, race car driver father to media excellent daughter. That'd be pretty cool.
Well, that just shows the raw kind of emotion and passion that you feel for the sport. I, however, would go in a completely opposite direction.
Oh, bastard.
I get it to review something like a 1990 Vauxhall Astra Belmont 1.4 saloon in a kind of lowest possible spec, because I'd like to see what she could draw from the depths of inanity that was a car like that. That was, by the way, back in the day, the most stolen car in the UK, because it was such a piece of crap. You could open it, you wouldn't need a coat hanger. You could probably do it with your hand in the panel gap. But I'd like to see Shay draw some kind of passion out of that piece of crap.
Now, were they being stolen to then be driven? Or was there, say, a nationwide, very underhanded effort, yes, of folks to steal them, hopefully drive out to the coast, and then just push them over the cliff to rid the country?
It was like a pre-Uber thing of just readily available free ride, I think what it was, because they were so easy to steal. You wouldn't waste a brick putting it through the window. You could just push the window down with your hand. Terrible, terrible cars. Fold back the window frame, and then you don't have to break the steering lock. Just rock it to what? Terrible, awful. I'd like to see Shay have a bit of a crack at that. So, from one end of the motoring spectrum to quite the other, it would be interesting to see what Shay made of that one.
3 to go. We're going to go with Nathan Brown, Facebook. Happy Christmas, guys. Thank you. As racing fans, I'm sure both of you, like most of us, appreciate pieces of racing history, keepsakes, memorabilia, etc. Nathan, I am completely surrounded. I have a bunker of exactly what you mentioned. What is your favorite piece of racing memorabilia that you own, and how did you come to own it? Mine is a BBS wheel from the front of a Panos LMP1 Roadster. I bought it at Sebring in 2011 or so at the ALMS store for about $60. $60! Wow. I recall quite distinctly, as I was carrying it back to the car for safekeeping, that Bill Adam, who was doing commentary that year, eyed me rather suspiciously as if I'd stolen it from a team's garage.
Soldier Bill would come up again.
All right. Well, I've answered this a couple of times in episodes. Why don't you go, and then I'll try and think of something new to offer.
I've got various bits and pieces. The two bits, one is owned by me, one is owned by my son, but I am custodian of it. Both bits of bodywork. One is a very small piece of bodywork. It's about the same size as maybe a large mobile phone. And it is in Gulf colours. It is possibly the largest remaining piece of the loader Aston Martin that on its first lap in anger, Thomas Enger comprehensively destroyed at Scene Corner at Paul Ricard in its very first test. I have that. A rather larger piece. I think I've told this tale before, but it bears retelling. It's the early days of my history with Le Mans, late 90s. It was the Toyota GT1, the number 2 car, 4 a.m.-ish, coming through the first turn, was tagged by a Porsche GT2 from memory, driven by Michel Ligonnet, pitched Thierry Boutsen into a terrible accident, which completely destroyed the entire bodywork of the Toyota, ended Thierry's career, did enough damage to his back that he was not going to be getting back into anything of pace again. And I was standing watching that incident from turn 1 with my then young son, James, now into his 30s. And we waited until all was done, and a very nice marshal, happened to be one of the marshal's posts manned by British marshals, as many are at the Le Mans 24 Hours, could see that my young son was worried and distressed, and basically made sure that he was kept appraised that Thierry was indeed fine. He got some back pain, but it was just taking time. And as they were clearing up the accident scene, passed across the debris fence, effectively a goodly proportion of the front end of the car, which includes the number panel and the light panel and the light thing. But that piece of bodywork was taken the following week to the Goodwood Festival of Speed, where it was signed with not a little amusement by one Alan McNish, who shared the car with Thierry. He then arranged for Thierry to sign it. I think it was the following year where Thierry was, maybe a couple of years later, where Thierry was actually team managing one of the champion Audis. And then sometime later, I bumped into the final member of the triumvirate with one Ralph Kelleners, who was testing a Ferrari at a British GT day at Silverstone. So that is their sign by all three men. A piece of racing history. I've seen the restored car now. The number 2 car is back in one piece. They can't have that bit back. It's ours. But that has happy memories of a fantastic car. And I should say, by the way, the one and only car so far, MP, that I've managed to contribute to your fantastic in-car audio collection with the one car that's in private hands, in the hands of Norman Nato at the Le Mans Classic this year. It is still a car that's very special to me.
That's awesome. And you need to post a photo of that, too. I would love to see
I will.
It. Boy, I have a lot of memorabilia, so I fear that I've mentioned this before, but it is what it is, as our pal Juan Montoya would say. Of the most personal items, it always comes back to my hero, Dan Gurney, and the fact that outside of all the things that he was known for being that were excellent and more, is he was an incredibly thoughtful person. And I have a number of cards that he sent, a letter that he sent, a number of things that he sent over the years where after we had spoken, I'd interviewed him for a magazine feature or whatever it might have been. That magazine would show up at All American Racers. He would then remember that we spoke about it a few months earlier, and I guess apparently my writing was not exceptionally poor, so he would just send kind notes saying, hey, I really enjoyed this thing that we did on whatever. And just to have that show up, it's just crazy, Graham. It's truly crazy to go to the mailbox.
Amazing.
See a letter or whatever card type thing sitting in there addressed to you from Daniel Sexton Gurney. And he and I had became good friends and such. But yeah, that stuff, where it's not, I have some of those similar things like you mentioned too. The car crashed, in front of you. You got the piece.
Yeah.
Got some of those. Bought some stuff too. I've got some old Nissan IMSA GTP bodywork as well, sitting in my office closet. The one that I would say that is maybe the coolest thing that I have now is the 1967 Le Mans program. That when Ford was celebrating the 50th anniversary of that victory in 2017, they got Dan Gurney and AJ Foyt together for a celebration at Long Beach. And AJ is not someone he is not big on talking about Le Mans. He's not keen on signing things related to Le Mans for whatever reason. Was fortunate to know both AJ and Dan and was able to get the two of them to sign the front of that 1967 Le Mans program. So, I'm trying to think how I say this in a sensitive manner. If the house catches on fire, I am making sure that my wife is safe and outside first. Our cats are directly behind her. I am probably grabbing that program third before my laptop, before my camera gear. I can replace just about everything else. I can't replace that. So, anyways, Big Eagle.
Fabulous.
Yeah, there we go. All right, brother. I know we're almost at an hour and a half into the show, a prude hour and a half. We have two more to go. Two more to go.
Well, Chris Ward asks, what's your favourite track food? Is it Oostburger at Road America and Brickyard Burger at Indianapolis? A good starting points, he says.
Why don't you grab this? I think I answered this last time we got it from someone else.
Well, okay. A couple. There is a particular, I think it's a pork type burger that you can get at Fuji Fuji Speedway. That's amazing. Frites and mayo at Spa-Francorchamps, and indeed waffles on a good day at Spa-Francorchamps are the good ones. And there are a couple of places in the astonishing area that surrounds the Nürburgring where you absolutely have to go and get schnitzel and steak on a stone, by the way, at the Piston Class as well. They're the kind of things that, to me, mean you're there.
And why, I'm asking, did no one at BMW or their partner team Schnitzer ever think to start the Schnitzel BMW kind of, little side food concession? They would have made a fortune.
Oh, indeed, some kind of livery that's based on it looking like a schnitzel. That would have been pretty good, wouldn't it?
I'll throw two things that come to mind here, and one was a favorite. One was another favorite that turned into not a favorite. I think it was the 2010, 2011 IndyCar finale at the Motegi circuit in Japan. In the paddock, there was a little food truck, and it was essentially chicken on a stick, and it was this teriyaki prepared chicken. It was not any. I think you get the two little sticks with the chicken on them. It was not a large portion, but it was also very expensive. Brother, I spent myself into oblivion right there because they were so damn. I probably went back 3 or 4 times in one day, and again, it still wasn't a large amount of food, but it was so good. Where, when you're doing your work or whatever, you're like, all right, I'm going to stop and go get some more. I mean, come on, that's just too good. So the other one, and this is, I guess, our second reference to our friend Wouter Mellison from UltimateCarPage.com. This would have been Le Mans, maybe 2011, 12, 13. A couple hours after the start. I think he and I both shot the start down just at the exit of the Ford chicanes. And on the other side of the wall there, to get into that little area, you walk out, and just on the other side, that's where you would have, whether it's the Ferris wheel going on or whatever, but there's a lot of little food vendory type things going on there. So we'd done whatever we did. I think we shot the start there, walked up, went down, up and over the hill, came back to essentially that same area for whatever reason and exited there. We were both pretty hungry. It was a couple hours into the race. And there was some sort of food joint that had more or less a baguette with some sort of hamburger-ish type something. It was kind of this wasn't a traditional hamburger bun type meal. It was more of a cutting open, maybe half of a baguette, putting kind of a thin strip cooked hamburger type something. It was hamburger, and then just some whatever sauce on top, and I think some frites, some fries thrown on top as well, maybe. Anyways, we were both starving. We saw that, and we looked at each other like, "Oh, this is perfect." Well, it tasted amazing going down, and
I think we know where this is going.
Ooh, so it got me, and I don't know if it was the meat that was cooked. Whatever it was, it got me, but I could manage it. I often have a bit of an iron constitution, so there might have been a few extra pit stops I had to make throughout the rest of the event, but it didn't hamper me that bad. Wouter, on the other hand, it locked him up within an hour, and I swear, I don't know if he kept a time record of it, but I swear he spent the majority of the 24-hour in the damn toilet, because it turned him into a human sprinkler, and it wasn't pretty. And
he's still there.
So mad at me. Oh yeah, it wasn't necessarily my fault, but he was just like, "That was a bad recommendation." I'm like, based on how it went through you and me, I gotta agree, that was a really bad call, Pruitt. And but I'm sorry that, if anything, that I was less affected than you. But yeah, we pretty much, in however many times we walked past it the following year or whatever, it was just we'd kind of hold our hand up and block our view because we didn't even want to look at that place, knowing that it was a poopy 24 hours of Le Mans. All right, and hey, that might segue into our final question.
Well, doesn't it just? Because if he was here, this would be indeed Francis' most embarrassing moment. What is, Rayan Panther from Twitter says, what is the most embarrassing moment you've had in your career?
Wow. I mean, just expecting that I could pick one?
I've got a couple. I've got a couple.
Okay.
Let me crack on. Well, both involved the broadcasting side of my career. First was very early days. First picked up a microphone at a race meeting, British GT, with the then commentator David Addison. But then little later, middle part of the first decade of this millennium, was handed a microphone at Road Atlanta in the tower that's just been demolished by John Hindhaugh as part of the then ALMS radio service. I think during a red flag period, but became semi-regular thereafter, and it must have been one of the pretty early ones, because I was on mic, or at least supporting John, in the closing stages of Petit Le Mans, and it was the GTS battle between, I'm pretty certain it was one of the Care Racing Pro Drive Ferraris and the Corvette GT1s, going back to green. And as the cars came flashing by us, the viewing point for broadcast there faced towards turn one. So you're standing, looking at the start-finish line, immediately to your right with the hot pit over to your extreme right, and looking down towards turn one. And out of the corner of my right eye, I saw the yellow car come down pit lane and called it. The Corvette's pitted, and unfortunately what I'd completely forgotten was that the safety car was indeed a bright yellow Corvette. It was just the safety car coming in. John's never let me forget that one, which means that I'm going to thoroughly enjoy the second one I'm going to tell you about, which is to do with the Nürburgring 24 Hours, another one where Radio Le Mans started back in 2007. Didn't do the full race that year, but thereafter the full race has been part of the live events that are brought to you by, and were accommodated in the Aston Martin Lounge, which in those days, the early days of that broadcast, were in what is the Jaguar Lounge, which was funded from their Formula One days, a very expansive space, and we had a corner in that suite. I think it must have been about 2008-9.
Yeah.
They had a cocktail bar. And let me tell you, those cocktails went down very easily. And I've never been able to listen to that broadcast. I do know that all of us were pretty well toasted on air. And I think it was that same year that we started in the middle of the night asking what the interference was on air, and that interference on air, I have to say, I was smashed. And I really haven't been able to listen back to it. But the interference on air was John lying on one of these beautiful leather Jaguar-branded couches, snoring like a wild animal in the background, and readily listenable on air. That right there, not our finest hour. Brilliant race to cover. Thoroughly enjoyed every single year I did it. That's one I won't be listening back to anytime soon.
Well, from the long annals of Pruitt embarrassment, Rayanne, I will choose one from my former career in the sport on the team side, crew member side, and one from my modern day career. The most embarrassing, I believe, would have been, I think it might have been 97 or 98 in the Indy Racing League as an engineer. I was an assistant engineer, was in charge of fuel strategy, race strategy, and I don't remember exactly what position we were running in with our little TKM Motorsports Genoa Racing effort with Greg Ray, but it was pretty decent. We were running well for a very small minnow-like team, and I ran us out of gas in the middle of the race. I ran us out of fuel for no particular... and it was not because I had gotten my sums wrong and I thought we had more. It was just me not paying proper attention or getting distracted by something else. And as a small team, as one hoping to garner attention from potential sponsors and who knows what, as a small team in motor racing, you just, dear listener, just know that those small teams, from the hospitality folks all the way to the person driving, there's a pretty good element at most times of like, man, we just want to do something good to get recognized, not for the sake of recognition, but for folks to buy in and help us move up and become bigger and better. There's that, hey, look at me, guys, let me in, let me play with you up, in the big leagues. That's often a component of what's going on. Might be deep in the subconscious, but you're just trying to do something that proves, elevates you, gets you to where you want to be. And we were running really well, and for no damn reason other than my own stupidity and ineptitude, ran the thing out of fuel during green flag racing. It's an oval. The laps are taking 20 seconds, 25 seconds. And just to have our driver, Greg Ray, say, I don't know what happened, but the thing just shut off. And, yeah, and he had coasted around slowly.
Well, they got you on TV. Surely, he got you on TV.
No, because we weren't. I don't think so. We weren't, again, a team really worth following at that point. So it was probably like, all right, well, that's kind of what we expect from those people. So it's just one of those things where you go, damn, dude, there was no reason. There was no reason to stretch. It wasn't end of the race. Well, I don't know if we're going to make it, but boy, if we do, we're going to win. It's going to be glory. It was just a mundane thing where we had a chance at something good towards the end if we hung around. And I just murdered that chance by having us go too long for no reason. So that was very embarrassing because you have a driver who has strapped in and risked his life and apparently for no real ability now for a quality result. You have more or less, when he says, hey, it just shut off, I felt like I think I'm out of gas. You then have every single head pivot towards you and look at you like you had one job and you failed. Oh, you just want to shrink and just disappear. So that was that. And again, I mean, I know that many folks have done that, but yeah, I know that pain because I've foisted it upon myself. The most embarrassing moment probably in my journalism career, I'd say a story that I wrote, I don't know, Graham, maybe 4 years ago, something like that. I had it in my mind. IndyCar was looking to go race somewhere, Bahrain, Dubai, something like that. I don't remember 100% of the details because I've tried to block it out apparently. It was really at the time where ISIS was at its peak of just brutality and murder and anything American, anything European, British, you name it. Just, wicked brutality. And I had it wound up in my head knowing that IndyCar and any attempt to go to the Middle East would just potentially leave the series exposed to some sort of ISIS attack or the risk of such, and wrote a story that basically said, or asked IndyCar and their CEO and such, is there any concerns about safety in this? Is this the right time to go? And I think it was, again, I forget exactly where I wrote that it might have gone, but there was, in hindsight, there was no reason to write it. There were some folks who just right off the bat when it went up, just replied instantly and said, dumb story. Stupid story. And I've written many of those, so that wasn't the first time there. But this is just one of those things where I haven't done it many times in my career. It happens once a year, once every couple of years, where for whatever reason I get my head into a place where like this is a thing. And boy, I wish I could take that story back. And again, it's years ago. It's been forgotten for the most part. But it was pure trash. In concept, in every aspect, I should have shot that down and never put that into print because although it did nothing, I mean, it didn't change anything, it didn't affect anything, no lives. Again, it's just on a personal embarrassment standpoint, I look at that and go, well, whenever you're feeling good about yourself, you at least know how far you can go in the opposite direction. You've got the bumpers there of like, okay, idiot. That's the definite example of when you should maybe think smarter in your brain.
Well, it is the season of goodwill to all men and women, and you've now purged yourself of that embarrassment. Surely it will never occur to you again. Or maybe you'll just wake up screaming every 2 or 3 weeks thinking, it's a real thing! I get the same. MP, this, I think, is our last of the year, isn't it?
Well,
I'll just squeeze one more in.
Yeah, we'll probably do one next week, but we're not done because you need to choose a favorite question to send a Marshall can't pronounce it. I created another new word. Marshall can't pronounce the word tricks properly.
You know what? I thought we'd actually got through an edition without you pronouncing a new word in the English language. Yes, produce it is the one. Now, you named one earlier, didn't you? Which was the our mate Baxter?
Yeah, or Alex Eichmiller seemed to have a good one.
They did. Alex Eichmiller, Baxter.
Again, it's
you know what?
Yours to a word. I think Alex he at least kicked me off on a rant. It might have been a dumb rant, but he I don't know. What do you think?
Baxter's going to hate us, but I'm going to go for Alex Eichmiller.
Well, there's always next week's show, because I believe you have 3 to give away, so...
Got one more to go, so we'll be popping up, so it's a Facebook question, so I'll be asking Alex to identify himself, drop me a line. Winner from last week should be getting his prize any moment now, and I can tell you the 2 remaining offers are both fabulous Scalextric Mercedes-AMG GT3s. One is the Sun Energy One car from this season. The other one, the ABBA Roll Center matte black and silver green car, but those 2 will be the choice. So there'll be one of those still remaining for next week. We will put out a call for questions, and the questions that have come in the meantime will go into the mix for that. I was just going to say thank you to you, Marsha Pruitt, for making this a thing. Thank you to everybody that listens for keeping it a thing. Thank you absolutely to everybody that's popped in the questions, not just this week, last week, but every week. It's we have often whipped ourselves, MP. I know that's a personal lifestyle choice, but in this case, thinking that we are, maybe a little bit too late to the punch, and then I'll look back 20 minutes, half an hour, 45 minutes later, and there's dozens of questions every single week. You share our passion. I love that. This is always a highlight for the week. No matter what trials and tribulations life brings, I know this has been a real positive through the year, MP. It's been a tough year, I think, on the personal front for both of us for a variety of reasons. But this, for me, is part of my happy place.
Oh, well, also this is something that I enjoy quite a bit. I love the fact that my just perpetual lack of time telling is a thing. I mean, I hope it's fun for our dear listeners. I can say that we have kept the show to a metric 1 hour and 30 minutes. So I believe, yes, so a metric is also, I think that puts us over 3 hours here. Regardless, Graham Goodwin, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Merry Kwanzaa, Happy Hanukkah, happy any and everything to whatever you happen to celebrate, either through the religiosity of your choice or otherwise. Festivus as well. Happy everything. Thank you for just being awesome. Thank you for giving us a reason now. We've spent more than 3 hours on December 22nd, a Saturday morning / afternoon, just answering questions and talking and having fun with you instead of, I guess, drinking. Well, we did start off drinking, but instead of getting drunk and hurling obscenities at passers-by. Because we do...
I'll do that later. I'll do it later.
We enjoy doing this, and I would be remiss if I did not close by saying thank you to our dear friends at Cooper Tires for supporting us in what we do, and I do look forward to announcing hopefully some more folks that will be supporting what we do, not only with the overall podcast, but also with the Week in Sporty Cars. So with that, Graham Goodwin, why don't you say farewell?
Farewell. Merry Christmas, everybody.